this is what we do, not what you're going to see on telly. And I think that's really important. So for me personally, coming along to CrimeCon, I just look at the list of people that are there, honestly, and I'm proud to be associated with them. There are some fascinating people there. People who've really fought for justice for their children. People who are campaigning for victims, for survivors. So it's an event that when you look at the name, you might think, oh, they're just going to sit there talking about serial killers and what they got up to. Couldn't be further from the truth. It's really about what goes on, how it impacts the victims, how the investigations are carried out. It's educational as much as anything.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Morning, 9:30 on Monday the 7th of October, live across the UK. This is Britain's Newsroom with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
So Sue Gray calls it a day. Did she jump before she was pushed? Sue Gray has quit as the Prime Minister's chief of staff. Don't worry, she's got a new part-time role. We'll tell you all about it.
Stand with the Jewish community. That's the message from the Prime Minister as he again calls for a ceasefire in the Middle East in the anniversary of Hamas's attack on Israel. Mark White has the latest.
Well, a year after that horrific attack on October the 7th last year, Israel is still fighting in Gaza, but they measure success by the fact that the vast majority of rockets have ceased being fired into Israel by Hamas.
And meanwhile, there's been a surge of young people supporting Hamas in this country who think the massacre of the Jews was, quote, justified.
Britain, the home of the illegal migrant, as almost 1,000 people crossed the Channel on Saturday. New research shows 1 person in every 100 of the population, can you believe this, is an illegal migrant. You start smashing up those gangs, Prime Minister.
And your nuclear veterans need you. We will reveal the amazing amount of money that you raised to fund the annual reunion for British servicemen and their families. The servicemen took part in nuclear tests in the 50s and 60s. Brian Unthank was one of them, and he told us about the skin cancers he suffered.
23 so far. I was supposed to go back in October and get more removed, but that's been put back another 6 months. And I lost my teeth at the age of 20.
Good Lord.
I'm now 86 years old.
And looking fabulous, if you don't mind me saying.
I love the feeling of it.
We had a good hug.
Very nice.
Oh, weren't they amazing on Thursday?
Fantastic.
Guys?
Very moving, very powerful. And we know how powerful and moving it was because of the response of our viewers and listeners.
Yeah.
We'll tell you a little later about how much you've raised and the money's still pouring in.
And we're going to be talking to another family member of a veteran, a daughter, this morning on the show as well, to express their thanks to all of you at home, so don't miss that. And we're going to be discussing what's going on with the Labour Party.
Yeah, what's going on with the government? I'll tell you what's going on with the government. It is a complete shambles. That's what's going on. That's what Sue Gray being sacked, not pushed. She didn't resign, she was sacked. Not even 100 days and the chief of staff has gone. What a shower.
Let us know your thoughts this morning. gbnews.com/your say. First, to the very latest news with Sophie Reaper.
Thank you, Bev. It's just after 9:30 and these are your latest GB News headlines. This morning, people across Israel have gathered to mark the one-year anniversary of the October 7th attacks. In Jerusalem, Israelis carrying flags and placards with the faces of missing people gathered outside President Netanyahu's home. At 6:29 local time, a siren rang out to mark the hour that Hamas-led militants launched rockets into Israel last October 7th. According to Israeli figures, they killed some 1,200 people and took about 250 hostages to Gaza. Meanwhile, new polling carried out on behalf of the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism has found what they called concerning levels of support for Hamas among young people in Britain. The YouGov poll found that 9% of 18 to 24-year-olds in the UK had a so-called favourable view of Hamas, compared to 3% across the general public. In politics, Parliament is set to return today following a recess for the various party conferences which have been taking place for the past few weeks. MPs will be back at Westminster today, but their return coincides with further controversy for the government after the PM's Chief of Staff, Sue Gray, quit her job yesterday. This has prompted Sir Keir to reshuffle his staff, with the leader of Labour's general election campaign, Morgan McSweeney, taking on the Chief of Staff role instead. Earlier, Shadow Leader of the House of Commons, Chris Philp, told GB News Breakfast that this is just one example of Labour chaos.
Keir Starmer's government has collapsed into chaos after just 93 days. He can't even run his own number 10 Downing Street operation, let alone run the country. Frankly, this has all fallen apart a lot faster than I was expecting. But this sort of chaos at the heart of Downing Street shows us why they've made so many mistakes. It's no surprise that his opinion poll ratings have collapsed so catastrophically. And I think this Sue Gray debacle is an example of that.
A protest will be held outside Parliament later on today following the government's controversial decision to scrap the winter fuel allowance for pensioners. Last month, Labour voted to cut the benefit for all but the poorest pensioners, although the Unite Union has argued this would only save around £1.4 billion every year. The union are now encouraging people to speak out and join them as they lobby the government to reverse the decision to make these cuts ahead of the winter months. Finally, the trial for Daniel Khalif is scheduled to begin at Woolwich Crown Court in London today. Khalif stands charged with committing various terror offences while serving in the British Army, but also made headlines last year after allegedly escaping from Wandsworth Prison and spending 4 days on the run. A mass manhunt was carried out for the former soldier last September until he was recaptured and returned to prison. Those are your latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sophie Reaper. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Sophie. Good morning. Welcome to Britain's Newsroom, live across the UK on GB News with me, Bev Turner, and Andrew Pearce.
Well, we want to start the show this morning with a very big thank you to you, our viewers and listeners.
On Thursday, we asked if you'd help us to raise £25,000. That was so that nuclear veterans, so those that took part in nuclear testing for the military in the 50s and 60s, could have their annual reunion.
Well, not only did you smash that, you actually raised almost £47,000, which not only can fund next year's reunion, but almost enough for 2026 too.
Yeah, it's wonderful news. If you still want to donate to the Veterans Reunion, you're going to see the QR code in the bottom right hand of the screen now. Grab your phone, open the camera, scan the code. It will take you straight to the page. Or, if that's a bit laborious, go to gofundme.com and search for Nuclear Test Veterans Reunion 2025. And we are genuinely so grateful, and we know that they are too. They're absolutely blown away by it.
They were, and what a great cause, because they were literally unpaid guinea pigs who've suffered huge health issues. The lovely Brian, who came on with his 92, 93 skin cancers, and of course his wife had 13 miscarriages.
Yeah, and the damage from these experiments which were done on these soldiers, and some of them they weren't all in the military. Some of them were civilians taken out to Easter Island, and once they were there, found out what they would be subjected to. And the damage, I think the bit that really stuck with me, what Brian Unthank had said, was that 500 years it will take for the ancestors
to be washed out.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, and they've had no compensation, and successive governments of every political hue have turned their nose up, and it is a scandal because this has been going on for 72 years. It makes the row over the post office, which is legitimate and appalling,
of course,
pale into insignificance, and we've had the infected blood scandal. And remember, this government is bringing in a new law about ensuring greater transparency and holding public organisations to account. Well, Start there, Ministry of Defence.
Right, gbnews.com/yoursay for all of your thoughts this morning. But Sue Gray has quit, or more likely, she was fired behind the scenes in her role as Sir Keir Starmer's Chief of Staff, over fears that she had become a distraction.
So her exit follows reports of, well, not reports, there were tensions in Downing Street, including with the Prime Minister's Chief Advisor, Morgan McSweeney. He was head of strategy, who is now stepping into her role.
She hasn't gone completely. She's been appointed as the envoy, I love this title, For the regions and nations, which means what?
Nothing.
It's a grand title.
It's,
the envoy for regions and nations.
I mean, envoys, you think of an envoy as like a Middle East envoy. Tony Blair was in the Middle East, or an envoy to the UN, but the regions being Manchester, Liverpool, so we need an envoy. She's very keen on it's to try to soften the blow of her being fired, and she's carrying the can for the huge rows over the botched handling of winter fuel, taking away from pensioners, the freebies from Lord Ali, the Prime Minister taking £32,000 worth of suits, the Taylor Swift tickets, and then, of course, she is blamed for the fact that they, in my view, lost leave of their senses last week, and they said he was going to give back £6,000 worth. What about the rest, Prime Minister?
The thing is, I think people at home might be going, well, why do we care about this woman? Nobody's elected her. We don't know who she is. But that role, Chief of Staff, is very, very
pivotal.
Powerful. Absolutely crucial behind the scenes at Number 10.
It's an absolute admission that Number 10 is not working. And if Number 10 is not working, that impacts on the whole of government. That's why it matters. And
I think probably a peerage in the offing.
Peerage will be coming, you can be certain of that. What do you do in public life if you're useless? You get a knighthood or a peerage. That's what happens. You see it with Rishi Sunak's resignation peerage list. Some resignation honours list. Some of the people who persuaded him to go for an early election will get knighthoods and peerages. Visual.
Well, let's talk to former Labour Minister Ivor Kaplan, who joins us now. Morning, Ivor. Is Andrew right there that if you're useless, you just end up getting a thank you with a peerage and sit in the House of Lords? Is that what we're looking at here for Sue Gray?
Let's start. Andrew's never right on most of these things, so let's just move on from there. And firstly, you know, what a great service that GBNews did to those military men the other week, and to get that support. In terms of this, look, she's done a fantastic job for the Labour Party over the last, I don't know, 18 months or so, and I'm afraid it just didn't work out. And that happens. It happens in Conservative governments, and it happens in Labour governments of the past, and you just have to keep changing things. Morgan McSweeney is someone I've known 20 plus years in Labour politics, and he's a fantastic organiser, and he'll be a very good Chief of Staff. And I think that has slightly strengthened the team of people who know their background. And that's one of the things that probably, despite Sue Gray's excellent work, she's not in that category.
If she's excellent, why has she been fired? And she has been thrown under a bus, hasn't she, Ivor, for the disasters after disasters after disasters, freebies, the Wahid Ali being given a pass to all access to Number 10 Downing Street. She apparently approved that, unprecedented for a donor who's given so much money to be given an all-access pass to Downing Street. And then apparently it was her decision for the Prime Minister to give up £6,000 worth of freebies last week, when then everybody says, well, hang on, what about the Deputy Prime Minister's freebies since the election? What about the Home Secretaries and the Chancellors and the Foreign Secretaries? A complete mess. But the Prime Minister took the decision to take the freebies, and he took the decision to give them back. It was the Prime Minister's decision with the Chancellor, hang on, Ivor, to take away winter fuel from some of our poorest pensioners at a time when they announced, with great bravado, and they think it's a triumph, huge bumper pay rises for train drivers and public sector workers.
Right, but the point here, Andrew, is that those changes to people's pay is something that has been prepared over the last year or so in terms of what's happened there. But let me just say this: the constant thing about how people have dealt with their issues in terms of when you're a member of Parliament and when you have these kind of things. These have all been handled properly. And what I'm pleased about is to see that now there's going to be some changes to the situation, and that everyone will be dealt with in the same situation. And I remember as a minister that it wasn't the same even then, 20 or so years ago. But the fact that it's going to be the same for all 650 members of Parliament, that's a very strong change to the system. And I think that is something that will work better and make sure that you always have the kind of information and ability of understanding why people have done things and how they do it, And that will be, I think, to the benefit of Parliament in its general self.
But does this decision to get rid of Sue Gray tell us that Keir Starmer is incredibly ruthless and ideologically driven, but will ultimately be will just push people off his party or his team if they're reflecting badly on him?
Bev, I think that's probably right. I think Keir understands how he wants to run the government over the next, however many years. And to do that, you sometimes have to make changes. I'm pleased that Sue Gray is still going to be involved in a other way, but to run the government, you need the right people at the right place. And I think Morgan is that. I also think the appointment of James Lyons is a really good appointment in terms as him becoming the comms director. So I think these are strengths that sometimes you have to do when you're running a government.
What do you think an envoy for regions and nations is, Ivor? Do you think it will be handsomely paid?
I couldn't possibly comment on that one, Bev, at all. But what I can say is there is, in Labour's terms, and in the manifesto, we did say there would be more work with the regions. Now, that's a wide thing. I mean, for me, in Brighton and Hove, or you, Andrew, that could affect Brighton and Hove as well in the longer term, as it will Manchester or Liverpool or anywhere else.
So the fact
that there's going to be changes to how these operate seems to me to be something that she may be very interested in.
Just to go back to where we started, Morgan McSweeney, who was head of strategy, he ran Keir Starmer's leadership campaign, he ran the general election campaign, he's taking over her job and everything's going to be fine now. What was he doing when all these problems were building up in the government's in-tray in the first 193 days? What was he doing? Was he asleep at the wheel? Because Sue Gray's taken all the blame. What was he doing? What was he saying? Why wasn't he saying, don't take the freebies, Prime Minister, or don't give back 6,000 freebies, Prime Minister? Prime Minister, are you sure if we announce this taking winter fuel away from pensioners at the same time we're giving bumper pay rises to train drivers, we'll look mean-spirited? What was he doing?
I know you're obsessed, Andrew, by all these so-called freebies, but everything that Keir Starmer has done has been registered in the right way with the parliamentary authorities.
Why did he give back £6,000 worth then? Why did he give £6,000 back if everything was fine?
He's made a decision that he didn't have to do, but he's done it.
No, Sue Gray told him to, because he's not a strong Prime Minister, he's weak.
He's made that decision. That's
He's weak.
I think anyone who supported what's his name, Johnson, can't talk about other prime ministers.
No, we're not talking about Johnson. We're talking about Keir Starmer. He's weak. He gave back £6,000 to freebies last week. Now he's seen the bad reaction to it, so he's fired the person who told him to give them back.
No,
that's weak.
That's not true, Andrew. And I would just say that at least everything that Keir Starmer has done and other senior figures in the Labour Party has been properly registered with the parliamentary authorities. And that system is going to grow into a much bigger system now, given what has happened over the last few weeks. I think that's a strong way forward for Parliament.
OK, Ivor, always good to see you. You always put up a great fight. Former Labour Minister Ivor Kaplan there. Up next, the world remembers Hamas's October the 7th attack. Of course, it's the anniversary today on Israel. But there are shocking findings about young Brits supporting Hamas's action on that day. We'll be discussing why that might be. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Why go out on a Friday night when Friday night comes straight to your home?
Talking about?
Join me and my A-team of top pundits. Chemistry tonight is electric. As we tackle the big stories of the day with wit, insight and fearless energy.
Man of the people.
It's all vibe.
Just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
So, order in Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, every Friday at 8, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Right, we're having beans this morning.
Beans for breakfast. There's no better breakfast, is there?
I like beans on toast for breakfast.
So do I. I would actually call myself a baked beans connoisseur.
Would you? Well, We can put you to the test. Tell us what the story is.
The story is, you might think beans, you might think Heinz. Heinz means beans.
Beans means Heinz.
Beans means Heinz. Heinz means beans. Who knows? So, of all of the supermarket baked beans, it is actually the Aldi supermarket version, this version over here, which came out on top. The Bramwell's baked beans, 76% on the taste test.
And they're much cheaper as well.
Much cheaper. Households can save, if you're buying 2 cans a week, £100 a year buying the Aldi version of these baked beans. So we thought we're going to do a blind taste test this morning.
Yes.
To see.
So we've got the Aldi beans, we've got M&S beans, and we've got beans Heinz. So I think number 2 is the best one.
Yeah, I agree.
Right,
Two came first best for me.
So the Heinz is number 3.
Interesting.
Which was the worst one?
Which is the worst one, which is the ones, actually, I'll buy it home.
Do you know what? That's just proven it. M&S was number one. And Aldi was number two, which was our favourite as well.
I said M&S.
Yeah, and we both said Aldi.
We did say Aldi. I have to be honest, I was not expecting that.
I told you. This is the hill I will die on. These are the beans that I get at home, and I love them.
At university, you get the tin that's half that size, and it was 21p for the store ones and 23p for Heinz baked beans. And as I say, the key was in the thickness of the sauce and how hard the beans were. They
actually are really nice. They're really. I am really surprised, and we buy more than 2 cans a week, so it saved me a couple of £100.
We get through 2 cans.
So you like the Aldi ones?
I like the Aldi ones. I'm shocked.
They're a lot
There you
cheaper. Yeah.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 9:50. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
So, today the world remembers Hamas's October the 7th attack on Israel.
This comes as a new poll shows there are some young Brits and youngsters who support Hamas and believe the reports about the October 7th massacre were exaggerated.
Or they think that the massacre of the Jews was justified. So joining us now is GB News' Home and Security Editor, Mark White. Morning, Mark. It's kind of remarkable to think that was a year ago. I remember those shocking images coming in of all those beautiful, innocent young people at that music festival and the Hamas terrorists parachuting in and all of the extraordinary ways that they arrived in Israel. And now we're hearing in this country today about the fact that, as Andrew just said then, that there are so many youngsters in this country who sympathise and think that was OK.
Yes, and one of the reasons why that is the case and why it's increasingly becoming the case, especially amongst young people on university campuses and alike, is because the images that they're seeing are the images of death and destruction in Gaza. Israel always knew that the sympathy for what happened on October the 7th was finite. It would last a certain period of time, in the minds of some, not very long at all. And then, of course, being saturated with these other images, then everything turns in terms of a great deal of criticism towards Israel. Having said that, there is still very significant popular support in Israel for prosecuting this war, both in Gaza and taking the fight to Hezbollah in the north.
It's interesting because Netanyahu's popularity plunged to levels he'd never seen before after the massacre, because it was a major security failure on his watch. But now, a year on, his popularity sky high again. Extraordinary. It's almost like he's been forgiven, or they've forgotten that the massacre happened on his watch and should have been detected.
Yes, we mustn't, brush over the fact that there are still hundreds of thousands of people that take to the streets of Tel Aviv and other areas on a regular basis, calling for a ceasefire and the return of the hostages. But the vast majority of people in Israel are full square behind Benjamin Netanyahu, his war cabinet, and their efforts to try to take the fight to Hamas and Hezbollah. Now, Israel will judge their success on the fact that Hamas is no longer firing on a daily basis hundreds of rockets into Israeli communities. It no longer has the capability to launch a significant attack into Israeli territory. Now, that doesn't mean the threat's completely gone, and in fact, just today, another 4 rockets, more symbolic than anything else, were lobbed from Gaza into surrounding communities there. There is still a significant operation ongoing in Gaza, although it is winding down, and the effort has switched to the north, which also has a great deal of popular support because you've got displaced communities, 70,000 people who've not been able to return to their homes because more than 8,000 missiles and drones have been launched by Hezbollah into Israel's northern communities.
Thank you, Mark. Well, we'll be reflecting on this throughout the show this morning, but still to come, Britain is the home for illegal migrants in Europe. We've got more than anyone else. Don't go anywhere. Here's the weather.
Despite the morning rain, it'll be a nice, warm, cosy day ahead. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. It's going to be a case of sunny spells, scattered showers today. We still have some rain in Scotland before turning colder later on in the week. So we've got some heavy spells of rain persisting across northern Scotland. That will gradually move its way northwards. But across much of England and Wales and Northern Ireland, it's a case of sunny spells, scattered showers developing through the afternoon. We've already got a band across northern parts of England, but the showers could turn heavy, possibly with the odd rumble of thunder too, but highs up to 17, possibly 18 degrees in the sunshine, more unpleasant towards the north. But as we go through Monday evening, there could be some difficult driving conditions through rush hour towards the south and west as we have some heavy spells of rain moving their way northwards. Drier for a time towards the south and east with some early evening sunshine across Northern Ireland and parts of northwestern England as well. Still a few showers remaining across parts of Scotland, but towards the north, we've still got outbreaks of rain across Orkney and Shetland during Monday night. So through Monday evening and overnight, this band of rain across the Midlands into parts of the southeast of England will continue to push its way northwards and again could be heavy at times. Towards the south, we then see another spell of showers moving through. There'll be some clear spells in between, but generally a mild night with temperatures holding up into the double figures. So to start Tuesday morning, some heavy spells of rain across Northern Ireland, parts of northern England into Scotland. Towards the south, some sunny spells, but also some frequent showers that could be on the heavy side, especially towards the south and west, mixed in with some sunshine too. Breezy towards the south and towards the far north. Chilly here, but in the sunshine, we could reach highs of 16 or 17. Bye-bye.
We can expect clear skies, leading to a light and warm day ahead. Lovely. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. In Tyrone, the A5 is closed in both directions to the northeast of Strabane for an investigation. The M22 in Antrim is closed in both directions between junctions 1 and 2, between the Dun City roundabout and the Ballygroovy roundabout because of a security alert causing queues in Northamptonshire. The A43 is closed in both directions between Rockingham Road and the A14 north of Kettering after a vehicle went through the central reservation. There are queues each way, especially back along the eastbound A14 towards there beyond junction 3. The A6 Desborough halfway back to junction 2 at Kelmarsh. In East Sussex, the A27 is closed each way between Portslade and Shoreham for an investigation causing long delays each way between Worthing and Brighton. And the M5 in Devon is partly blocked northbound by an accident at junction 28 at Columpton causing delays. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment. This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory. Don't miss My Big Opinion. Mark Meets and My Take at 10. Democracy is a funny old thing. And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it. Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it. That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here
We do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, it's 10 o'clock on Monday the 7th of October, live across the UK. This is Britain's Newsroom with me, Bev Turner, and Andrew Pearce.
Sue Gray's reduced paydays. Sue Gray sacked as the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff, but don't worry, she's a new part-time role with a reduced salary.
And stand with the Jewish community. That's the message from the Prime Minister as he again calls for a ceasefire in the Middle East on the anniversary of Hamas's attack on Israel, as memorials take place across Britain and the Middle East.
Meanwhile, there's been a really worrying surge of young people supporting Hamas. They believe reports about October the 7th have been exaggerated.
And Britain is officially the home of illegal migrants. New research shows that 1 person in every 100 of the population here is an illegal migrant.
Astonishing. And your nuclear veterans need you. You've raised almost £48,000 to fund the annual reunion for British servicemen who took part in nuclear tests in the 50s and 60s. From both of us and the station, thank you.
I think for me the most shocking headline today is this 1 in 100 people
Terrible.
in this country.
It's terrible.
Is here illegally. What?
And if we know that figure, if we know who they are, why are they here? Get them out. And this comes, of course, as on Saturday alone, 973 people crossed the Channel in small boats, the highest total for 2 years. When are they going to smash the gangs?
There's not a lot of smashing going on at the moment, is there? Let us know your thoughts, gbnews.com/your say. First of the very latest news with Sophie Reaper.
Thank you, Bev. It's just after 10 o'clock and these are your latest headlines. This morning, people across Israel have gathered to mark the 1-year anniversary of the October 7th attacks. In Jerusalem, Israelis carrying flags and placards with the faces of missing people gathered outside President Netanyahu's home. At 6:29 local time, a siren rang out to mark the hour that Hamas-led militants launched rockets into Israel last October 7th. According to Israeli figures, they killed some 1,200 people and took about 250 hostages to Gaza. Speaking at a London memorial event yesterday, the mother to the only British-Israeli hostage has asked why the UK is not doing more to secure the release of her daughter. Emily Damari was taken from an Israeli settlement across the border and into Gaza 1 year ago today. Let's take a listen to what her mother Mandy had to say.
My beautiful, funny and brave daughter, who I love to the moon and back, deserves to come home. I need to hug her again, and I need to see her smile. Try to picture what she is going through. Since the 7th of October last year, she has been held a hostage by Hamas terrorists in the Gazan terror tunnels, 20 metres or more underground, kept in captivity, tortured, isolated, unable to eat, speak or even move without someone else's permission.
New polling carried out on behalf of the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism has found what they called concerning levels of support for Hamas among young people in Britain. The YouGov poll found that 9% of 18 to 24-year-olds in the UK had a so-called favourable view of Hamas, compared to the 3% across the general public. Over to politics. Parliament is set to return today following a recess for the various party conferences, which have been taking place for the past few weeks. MPs will be back at Westminster today, but their return coincides with further controversy for the government after the PM's Chief of Staff, Sue Gray, quit her job yesterday. This has prompted Sir Keir to reshuffle his staff, with the leader of Labour's general election campaign, Morgan McSweeney, taking on the Chief of Staff role instead. Earlier, Foreign Office Minister Hamish Falconer defended Labour's so-called shaky start in government.
I don't at all accept in the first 100 days that this government has been a disaster. We've made real progress across a whole range of issues. I think it's been full of difficult choices which reflect the difficult inheritance that we've got as we become the government. But I think Keir Starmer and the rest of the government is getting on with the job that the British public elected us to do.
One person has been killed and several others injured by an explosion at a block of flats in the Scottish town of Alloa. At around 6 o'clock last night, fire and emergency crews were called to the residential property after reports of an explosion. A man was pronounced dead at the scene and 3 others were taken to the Forth Valley Royal Infirmary for treatment of minor injuries. New analysis has found that 10,000 children have fallen into poverty as a result of the child benefit limit since Labour took office. The data comes from the Child Poverty Action Group, who say the policy must now be abolished. However, the government says this cannot happen due to the state of the UK's public finances. The trial for Daniel Khalif is scheduled to begin at Woolwich Crown Court in London today. Khalif stands charged with committing various terror offences while serving in the British Army, but also made headlines last year after allegedly escaping from Wandsworth Prison and spending 4 days on the run. A mass manhunt was carried out for the former soldier last September until he was recaptured and returned to prison. And finally, a costs hearing will take place at the Royal Courts of Justice today as part of the Wagatha Christie libel case between Colleen Rooney and Rebecca Vardy. Following the ruling in 2022, which found Vardy had leaked Rooney's private information to the press, it was ordered that she would have to pay 90% of Rooney's legal costs. But now the legal battle rumbles on as questions are asked on both sides about which costs should reasonably be paid. Those are your latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sophie Reaper. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome back. Britain's Newsroom. It is a Monday morning. Thank you for joining us this morning. We're just looking at your comments coming in here in the news. Brian, oh, sorry. Hold the line, caller, while I just find...
No point me. It's on live, so I don't do that. I don't do that. If it's not on a piece of paper the old-fashioned way, I can't read
Honestly,
it out.
I sit here like his secretary, don't I, doing all this work for him. Brian has said the youngsters that support Hamas do so because they don't watch the news. They have their heads stuck into their phones and computers. They're being brainwashed. They should be given a dose of Sharia law.
It's particularly troubling when you consider how many young people were kidnapped from that music festival. Some of them were killed at the music festival. Some were dragged away. So that was their fellow young people, and yet these young people in this country say that the Hamas massacre was just 16% of them say it was justified, and 1 in 10 say what was going on that day was exaggerated. It wasn't exaggerated.
But you see, I think what's happened here, maybe, and I don't want to sound patronising to these youngsters, but they are being fed extraordinary, awful images from Gaza. We would all agree that 40,000 dead Palestinians, most of which are being, because the predominantly young population. Yeah. Those images are awful. So many young people being slaughtered, and therefore they're coming to the defence of those people. I get that instinct to want to do that. I have the same instinct to want to do that. But I think they've got to understand the trigger for this being October the 7th. They're now saying, well, you know, that was justified because just look what Israel are doing. Yeah, but Israel are bombing the living daylights out of Gaza, and I think that's wrong. But the events of October the 7th came out of nowhere for those innocent young people.
And Israel, one of the few democracies in the Middle East, still being backed by countries like Egypt, Jordan. Hamas is a terrorist organisation. You wouldn't get that from the BBC. It is a terrorist organisation.
It is a complicated...
And it wants to eradicate Israel from the face of the earth. That's in its DNA.
It is a complicated and miserable situation out there for everybody involved. Mary, good morning, Mary, says, keeping hostages in tunnels under the ground. How can anyone support these terror groups? These young ones out demonstrating need to think about the conditions that they are keeping them in. What can we, Joe Public, do about a government that we have no confidence in? How do we get rid of them, says Alex. A lot of you talking about the Sue Gray situation. Margaret says, so Keir Scammer, she calls him.
He's got a lot of nicknames.
He's giving Sue Gray a seat in the House of Lords, free money for signing in each day for that, just that, plus expenses, £300 plus. But she's causing harm to Britain's elderly.
£330, actually, tax-free.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't have to speak. Some of them have never spoken, but they still get the 333. Tax-free, by the way.
Andrew says, I can't stand the fact that illegal immigrants are being allowed to get to our shores without documents, etc., etc. But the fact that we accept so many males of fighting age that would willingly trample a 2-year-old to get here sickens me to the core.
Yes, because that's how that 2-year-old died, crossing the channel. There was a panic, and he was trampled to death by fellow migrants. Isn't that awful?
That is really awful. Right, keep your messages coming this morning, gbnews.com/your say. So, on that Middle East situation, a leading imam has described the relations between Jews and Muslims in this country as both fragile and fractured amid the ongoing conflict in the Middle East.
This comes on the day the world remembers the Hamas October 7th attack on Israel. So what can be done to ensure all communities feel safe in Britain?
Well, we're joined now by the Deputy Chair of the Conservative Muslim Forum, Naveed Asghar, and reporter at the Jewish Chronicle, Josh Kaplan. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. It's really great to bring you both together this morning to talk about this. Let's start with you, Naveed. How can we bring communities together in this country when the situation is so febrile?
Hi, Bev. Absolutely. You know, we need to keep working and having dialogue with each other. We live here in the United Kingdom, and we understand that the scenes that we see on television, social media, etc., are very harrowing. There's no doubt about that. But we live here in the United Kingdom, and we must keep dialogue open. Yes, it's been 1 year, and I totally agree that, you know, when Hamas went over the border and killed those teenagers at a festival, they did not ask their population that can we go and do this. They did not negotiate with their regional Muslim partners and countries to say we're going to do this. I don't think anybody in their living memory would ever have, you know, agreed to something like that. Until this day, there's still hostages outstanding. The first and foremost thing they need to do is return these hostages, and I'm sure that's where, you know, the stop will come from Israel, and our international partners will then negotiate a ceasefire and stop the killing that's going on. Yes, absolutely. Look, I'm not going to deny that Israel has bombed the living daylights out of Gaza. It's going to take decades to, you know, to rebuild that country. But we need to get the hostages back. There's no doubt about that.
Josh, what about what's happening here? On Saturday, there was a big march in central London again, and lots of photographs of people with banners and placards supporting Hamas, a terrorist organisation, supporting Hezbollah, and it appears the police turned a blind eye. We go back to this idea of two-tier policing, and I know many Jewish people feel it would be unsafe to walk into central London on a Saturday when these marches take place. That's never going to be able to solve community. We're never going to get community cohesion while that's carrying on.
No, I agree with you, and I think it's about coming from a point of shared values, right? Like, we need to be able to say that some things are unequivocally bad and they should be condemned, and I think that would include, for me, and I think for a lot of other people, supporting a prescribed terrorist organisation like Hamas or Hezbollah. But it's the sort of thing you see week in, week out on the streets of London. You see people that put swastikas on Israeli flags. You see people that make like grotesque caricatures of Israel's leaders, and, you know, I'm not saying for a second here that people shouldn't be able to exercise their free speech, but I think we will not get community cohesion. We will not get a sense that all communities are respected if we don't agree on a set of things that we think are beyond the pale and things that we think are acceptable.
Can we go back to you, Naveed? I mean, we know that Jewish people are fearful. Do you say Islamophobia has risen since what happened in October the 7th in this country?
Absolutely. Look, anti-Semitic attacks have risen vastly. Islamophobic attacks have risen drastically. And that is the last thing we want of communities living here in the United Kingdom. Everybody has a right to protest peacefully. And, you know, everybody should have a right to be able to go out freely in the street and exercise those rights. Nobody should feel under pressure or of the fear of attack from anybody else within our communities. You know, we live in the United Kingdom, which is a free and fair society. And we've been given those rights because a lot of countries, for example, in the Middle East, Africa, etc., you're not allowed to protest. If you protest, the armed forces, the police, etc., come down on you really, really hard unless, you know, the government authorises it. So the fact that we have those facilities available in the UK, we should take them at face value and let everybody protest. Now, look, I might not agree with your opinions, you might not agree with mine. We might have opinions, political differences, we might have religious differences, but absolutely they must be peaceful and everybody should be allowed to protest.
I think what maybe we're missing the part of this story is the fact that these tensions wouldn't boil over in the way that they currently do if we had been better at integrating different cultures and religions for not just the last 12 months, but frankly for the last 20 years. Because I think that's to some degree what's come home to roost here, Josh. Have we worked hard enough, do you think, to encourage communities to assimilate with each other so that when events happen in the Middle East, we all come together under a British identity, regardless of really where you were born or what your religion is?
I mean, I think if you look at the scenes from the last year, especially in London, I think you'll have to say that that's been a bit of a failure. I think there are people in this country that care so deeply about a conflict that's 5,000 miles away, that doesn't really concern them, that doesn't really have any personal impact on their lives. And I, for one, I can't really understand it. You know, my family's Israeli. My sister, until very recently, was in the IDF. I have a very personal connection to this. What I can't understand is why people who have been born and raised in the UK are willing to, you know, go out on the streets and get arrested and assault police officers in the name of ideas that frankly have nothing to do with them.
And what about, Navi, this shocking survey today showing so many young people in this country are sympathetic to Hamas, which is a terrorist organisation which wants to eradicate Israel from the face of the earth, and also thinks that what happened on October 7th has been exaggerated? Just very disturbing.
It is disturbing, and I think a lot of issues come down this to education, and most of the education is happening from TikTok, from YouTube, through WhatsApp messages, and it's you know, and the narrative is being put through by people who call themselves leaders of the Muslim faith here in Britain, when they actually don't represent a majority of the moderate British people who actually just want to get on with their life and carry on. And yes, of course, when issues happen around the world and people are being killed, innocent people are being killed, and it doesn't stop, then of course people do get aggrieved with that. But I think we need to be much better at educating our youngsters and ensuring that they don't actually get into the clutch of these extremists who are trying to, you know, portray a different narrative and trying to get people behind them. Essentially, a lot of people are doing this. You know, there's a lot of TikTokers wanting to create their own brands, their own, you know, their own money bank. They're trying to enrich themselves off of this war. I see it in local communities all the time. It's virtually got to a stage where if you're not with them, you're actually against them. So I often speak out and try to be a voice of reason, and I often get a lot of pushback for my views when I say, look, there's two sides to a story. They don't want to listen to the other side of the story. They only have one narrative, and they want to keep going on that. In regards to integration, look, a lot of work has been done over the last decades, and you know, it has worked, and I think a lot more work needs done. I think this, you know, the boom of the internet, and everyone's got mobile phones in their hand, when the information is so fast and steady, and there's no fact-checking of information that comes through these mediums, and young children, 10, 11, 12, 13 years old, have got this access 24/7. So we really need to look at a wider a society. We need to look at a much more wider way of how we deal with this. It's not just one issue that will resolve this. And if we don't look at it now, there's 3.9 million Muslims in the UK. Are we going to have this sort of situation every time something happens on the other side of the world? I think the government needs to look at this, and it disturbs local communities as well. It's not. So it's a very few, by the way, that shout the loudest. And cause the most upset, but then the moderate people have to either follow in line or go silent, and they don't have the voice or opinion or the strength to actually speak out.
OK, thank you, gentlemen. Really interesting. Deputy Chair of the Conservative Muslim Forum there, Naveed Asghar, and reporter at the Jewish Chronicle, Josh Kaplan. Thank you both.
Up next, find out which Tory leadership hopefully is tipped to take the win.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
The Sleep Report 2024 is based on a comprehensive survey conducted all across the country, and the report found that over half the population, get this, falls short of the recommended 7+ hours of required sleep each night. And shockingly, 1 in 4 of us is getting 5 hours or less, and that includes you, doesn't it?
Yes, I'm very bad at sleep. 4 or 5, I'd say.
That's
a bit
awful.
like Maggie Thatcher. What would you get on average?
I'd say at least 6. 7 probably average.
That's probably not good. I think you probably need 8. Well, almost half of Brits rate their sleep quality as 5 out of 10 or lower?
Dr. Manesh Shah and Dr. Sita Shah joins us now to tell us all about the sleep and how Brits are struggling. Good morning to you both.
Morning.
First question is to you both. How many hours do you both get?
God, I think it varies. I try and hit that 7 hours of sleep.
Why are Brits so bad at getting sleep, especially in terms of hours? 4 or 5 hours for me, 6 hours for you. It's the same for everybody out there in the UK. We're just not going to bed early enough. Is it as simple as that? Or is it slightly more complicated?
Yeah, so I think the key is to establish a good routine. So waking up at the same time every day, making sure that you're going to sleep at the same time every day, and being quite sort of rigid and strict with yourself when it comes to those timings.
And also, it's not just the length of, I get, say, 7 hours, it's the quality, isn't it? You've got different phases of sleep.
Yeah.
Just explain those. Is it, as far as I remember, REM, deep sleep? Just tell us about that.
Correct, yeah. So, essentially, there's 4 stages to sleep. So there's stage 1 and stage 2, which are your lighter stages of sleep. And then stage 3 is your deeper sleep. And then you've got the stage 4, which is your REM. Which is a rapid eye movement stage. And it's the stage 3 and the REM sleep which is really, really important for restorative and regenerative sleep.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
10:21, Britain's News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner. The panel's here, writer and journalist Emma Wolfe and former Labour advisor Matthew Talbot. You must be glad you're a former Labour advisor at the moment because, to be honest, not going terribly well, is it? They've thrown Sue Gray under a bus.
No, I said to Bev last week, I wouldn't say I take any great glee, not longer being part of the Labour Party or for even saying I thought this would happen. I think Sue's probably been done a disservice. The boys have got their way, they always do. I think the interesting thing will be that there's somehow going to be a reset. We have a politician in Keir Starmer who has never been popular, I always thought the Tories were 20 points behind, we weren't 20 points ahead. The first 100 days haven't gone very well, and all of a sudden we're supposed to expect that a rearranging of the deck chairs means that he's now going to surge on and do really well. I'm not convinced.
Because Morgan McSweeney, who was campaign director, so head of strategy at Number 10, now takes over from Sue Gray. He's been there all the time. Everything's been going wrong. Was he asleep at the wheel? What was he doing?
Probably briefing the newspapers, I would say.
Didn't brief
some may say.
Not me.
No, I just think it's. I don't think a lot of them have been prepared for what's to come, and I've always been of the opinion that this will be a one-term government. And actually, I'll share with you. Tony Blair said in his book in 2008, he predicted Keir Starmer. He said he assessed that there were 3 types of Labour when he came in as Prime Minister. You can have old-fashioned Labour, which could never win. That's your Jeremy Corbyn Labour. Yeah. Modernised Labour, which could win and keep winning, which was his ambition from the outset. But there is a third strand of Labour, which is plain Labour, which could win once, but essentially as a reaction to an unpopular Conservative government. I think that's the Labour Party currently in a nutshell.
The idea that a government needs a reset after barely 3 months. He hasn't reached the 100 days. Do you remember Rishi saying this would all fall apart, that he would destroy the country, Rishi Sunak saying that, in 100 days? He hasn't even reached his 100 days. Sue Gray was meant to set out a plan for the first 100 days.
Yes.
She hasn't made it.
We haven't had a budget yet.
Days.
No.
And, you know, you talk about Sue and you make her sound like a nice little pussycat. She wanted that money. She was very greedy about getting that. She's been moving desks away from the Prime Minister. I think the government is in chaos. And this was very much Starmer's appointment. He has clung to Sue Gray.
Yeah.
So I think this fatally weakens him and, you know, damages his authority.
What do you think of her getting this new job as ambassador? What is that? Envoy
to the region.
It's
a non-job.
It's
I'm sure Andy Burnham won't be very happy. He would consider himself to be an envoy for that region.
You would be surprised.
He does like.
So what I will tell you, this I don't think I'm breaching confidence, and if I am, I apologise in advance, is that Andy Burnham and Steve Rotherham at Labour Party conference led a letter that was signed and delivered privately to Keir Starmer
saying
keep her on.
Yeah.
I think Michael Crick, they were a big fan of her because the boys, as they're termed, the lads around Keir Starmer, were no fan of Andy Burnham. The problem is with the Labour Party constantly is it is ridiculously factional.
Yes.
If you're not in our club, we don't want to hear from you, and that was what I always
Andy
said.
Burnham is one of their best assets.
Yeah, but they fear him.
Well, you would assume so, but also
they
that
fear
means
him,
it's
Matthew.
potentially a threat.
They fear him
No,
because
exactly.
he's popular, which is, as you make the point, Starmer's never been popular. Andy Burnham's hugely popular. Telegenic, looks good. And I wrote last week, he begged Number 10, don't get rid of her.
That's absolutely true. And I think there was one mayor that didn't want to sign it. He was a bit worried about how it would look and is quite a close ally of Rachel Reeves, so therefore maybe didn't want to rock the boat a bit too much.
We're getting a picture of who Keir Starmer is now, Emma, aren't we? In a way that we didn't really have before the election, because all he had to do, as much as people are crediting Morgan McSweeney with some fantastic campaign, it wasn't a fantastic campaign. They just had to keep very quiet and not mess up.
They did, and as Matthew said, they were 20 points behind. Conservatives were 20 points behind. But I think Andrew makes a really good point in his piece in the Mail, which is that Keir Starmer's not an experienced MP. He's only been an MP since 2015, and doesn't have. I don't think he's shown judgment or kind of political instinct that you need to be agile on your feet, to understand that you come into office and you give some sweetness, you do some positivity. You don't come in and start slashing winter fuel allowance, even if you have to do that later, or even if you deliver the message in a different way. I mean, he's now got his comms chief from is it James Reynolds from TikTok and the NHS. But you don't. You do it in a different way. You talk about taking money away from the wealthy pensioners who can afford it, but you don't come in. What was Sue Gray thinking?
But also this idea that I think he's a weak Prime Minister, because whether he should have taken the freebies or not is another debate. But he decided last week, inexplicably, to give up £6,000 worth of freebies, which means everybody's now saying, what about the Deputy Prime Ministers? What about the Chancellors? But what about all the football freebies? Apparently that was her advice to him, which he should have rejected, but he took it. When it then backfires in public, because people think, what? He fires her.
Emma said bizarre, and I would agree. I read it and just thought, this has been handled terribly.
Yes.
First of all, the potential of how it may have looked in the first place. But what you're doing by returning some of it, and what people will read off the top headlines, is you're making it look like you've done something wrong. There is no suggestion you've done anything outside the rules. But now you're muddying the waters further and going, oh, well, this bit might have been bad.
But we had Ivor Kaplan on, the former minister, once saying everything was within the rules. It may be within the rules. It's how it looks. It stinks.
How it looks, and it wasn't necessary. It's these rolling stories. Today in the Telegraph, £100,000 for other ministers from the Premier League for football tickets, for the hospitality boxes. It just goes on and on and on, and there's more to come, because this doesn't heal the wounds, does it?
No.
It moves Sue Gray sideways. She'll probably be popped into the House of Lords.
She will.
But the problems go on. Morgan McSweeney isn't without controversy. He's an ideologue. You know, let's see what happens now.
Should we just get one more story in before we have to go to the news? But let's talk about James Cleverly, who's tipped to win the poll at the moment for the leader of the Conservative Party. Good choice, Matt?
He'd be the one I'd fear the most, and that's not because of where he sits ideologically. I thought his speech at Conservative Party conference was actually the right diagnosis. I think there's a lot of people that think they should tack right. If you're going to fish in just Reform voters' pond, there's only so many people in there. They did lose voters to Labour, they did lose voters to the Lib Dems, and ultimately lost a lot of people to apathy who just didn't turn out for them anymore. So he'd be the one. I think he looks good, he sounds good, former soldier, so people like that sort of shtick, and he's a competent speaker, so he's actually someone I encouraged 3 days after the election that he should stand.
And he's got a backstory which Generic does not have. His mum was an NHS midwife, dad was on a camp estate, son of migrants, all plays to the idea this boy's done good.
No, I think so, and he's the sort of guy that your mum would be happy to have over for tea. Yeah, probably. He's a nice, charming sort of bloke. So I think ultimately, where Keir can come across quite cold, I think Cleverly will seem quite likeable.
What do you make?
My heart is still Team Kemi. I think she's the brightest spark. I think she comes out with absolutely, I mean, she's an interesting woman. She's a thinker. She's a, but I think you're right about Cleverly. I think my head says Cleverly. Best option.
Well, we get the first result tomorrow. They'll go from 4 to 3.
And then it starts to be the Docky the horse training, which is when it gets fun.
And of course, I talked to Team Kemi last week. Kemi doesn't really speak to the press very much, but they said, we're very worried about the MPs. I said, you should be, because they are duplicitous Tory MPs. It is the most duplicitous electorate in Western Europe.
And
Tory
she's not
MPs.
well liked amongst Tory MPs?
No, and they saw her blow up last week about maternity pay, and she did blow up. And she did say it. I heard her say it. She said maternity pay is too high. She tried to say she was talking about excess regulation. She wasn't. She was talking about maternity pay. And then she tries to say, don't misrepresent me, which she's done before. And then she was suggesting that 10% of civil servants should be in prison.
Yeah, that was
10%.
We've still got a couple of minutes.
This leadership thing should have been done and dusted weeks ago. They've had an open goal all summer. Labour are falling apart in front of our eyes, and no one is holding
From one horror show to another, should Halloween be a bank holiday?
What? No.
So there are calls now that Halloween should become a bank holiday. Almost 1/3 of people polled want it marked as an official day off. A fifth of people admitting they prefer it to Christmas. If you put my children in that bracket, they absolutely prefer Halloween to Christmas. Kids are obsessed with Halloween now.
Yeah, they love dressing up, and I think that's the main thing. Should it be a bank holiday? Probably not. But without being a little bit bar humbug, I can't be doing with it. But it's great for the kids. It's nice to see my nephews
with it
getting
either.
dressed.
I never answer the door on Halloween.
I will join you in that.
Never, ever answer the door.
Americanisation.
Trick or treat, clear off.
Americanisation of our culture. I just told my 4-year-old this morning, you're not bringing pumpkins in here. We're not scooping bits of pumpkin out all over my house. No, you can do it at school. Do Halloween stuff.
Disappointed?
Very, very. But we need to carve it. And I said, no, we don't. I don't want you setting fire to rotting vegetables in my house.
The brainwashing around Halloween for this younger generation, I can't stand it either. Every time I think, I cannot be bothered to go out and buy a load of plastic tat. And all it is sweets and threatening to do mean things to people on their doorstep.
Unless covering their houses in massive.
And what are they going to do if you don't give them a treat? What do they do to you?
Well, that's the funny thing when you start seeing these 13 and 14-year-olds in a tracksuit and a mask just sort of going, trick-or-treating. If I don't give them something here, what's going to happen?
Well, at least Bonfire Night has a backstory. But what's the backstory for Halloween? I don't know it.
It's another ghastly Americanism.
Of course it's Americanism.
Well, I was listening to Breakfast this morning and Eamon was explaining that it's actually an Irish tradition originally, isn't it? Isn't it? All Hallows Eve and then you reflect upon the people who've died. And Eamon was saying on Breakfast this morning that they would, a bit like at Christmas, you put out a mince pie and they put out some food, and then in the morning your parents say, look, Grandma came to visit us in the night and she had a little bite of fruit cake.
I don't know about that either.
The Irish think that?
Apparently. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Clearly not the Catholics in Ireland. Think that.
Correct me if I'm wrong. GBNews.com/your says, it's being visited by the spirits of people you've lost.
Right, yeah, but
again, kids love ghosts.
Yeah, they do. And they love covering stuff with, when people cover their houses.
Do you answer the door on Halloween night?
No, I don't.
No, do you, Ben?
No. Well, normally I'm out with the kids walking around knocking on other people's doors. Yeah, believe me, I don't enjoy it. To quote Matthew, I can't be doing with it. That's how I feel. Right, Emma, Matt, thank you so much. Time for the news headlines. It's that time. Here's Sophie Reaper.
A very good morning to you. It's just after 10:30 and these are your latest GB News headlines. This morning, people across Israel have gathered to mark the 1-year anniversary of the October 7th attacks. At the Knesset building in Jerusalem, flags were lowered to half-mast in commemoration of victims to the attack. According to Israeli figures, Hamas killed some 1,200 people and took about 250 hostages to Gaza. Meanwhile, new polling carried out on behalf of the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism has found what they called concerning levels of support for Hamas among young people in Britain. The YouGov poll found that 9% of 18 to 24-year-olds in the UK had a so-called favourable view of Hamas, compared to 3% across the general public. Parliament is set to return today following a recess for the various party conferences which have been taking place for the past few weeks. MPs will be back at Westminster today, but their return coincides with further controversy for the government after the PM's Chief of Staff, Sue Gray, quit her job yesterday. This has prompted Sir Keir to reshuffle his staff, with the leader of Labour's general election campaign, Morgan McSweeney, taking on the Chief of Staff role instead. Earlier, Shadow Leader of the House of Commons, Chris Philp, told GB News Breakfast that this is just one example of Labour chaos.
Keir Starmer's government has collapsed into chaos after just 93 days. He can't even run his own number 10 Downing Street operation, let alone run the country. Frankly, this has all fallen apart a lot faster than I was expecting. But this sort of chaos at the heart of Downing Street shows us why they've made so many mistakes. It's no surprise that his opinion poll ratings have collapsed so catastrophically. And I think this Sue Gray debacle is an example of that.
A costs hearing will take place at the Royal Courts of Justice today as part of the Wagatha Christie libel case between Colleen Rooney and Rebecca Vardy. Following the ruling in 2022, which found Vardy had leaked Rooney's private information to the press, it was ordered that she would have to pay 90% of Rooney's legal costs. But now the legal battle rumbles on as questions are asked on both sides about which costs should reasonably be paid. Those are your latest GB News headlines. For now, I'm Sophie Reaper. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
But first, a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.3102 and €1.949. The price of gold is £2,021.52 per ounce, and the FTSE 100's at 8,273.90 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Up next, an update on your enormous response to sponsor the Nuclear Test Veterans Annual Reunion at Pontins. We have been blown away by your generosity. You smashed the £25,000 target and we'll tell you exactly what you did donate. This is Britain's Newsroom. Don't go anywhere on GB News.
Good morning. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. It's going to be a case of sunny spells, scattered showers today. We still have some rain in Scotland before turning colder later on in the week. So we've got some heavy spells of rain persisting across northern Scotland. That will gradually move its way northwards. But across much of England and Wales and Northern Ireland, it's a case of sunny spells, scattered showers developing through the afternoon. We've already got a band across northern parts of England, but the showers could turn heavy, possibly with the odd rumble of thunder too, but highs up to 17, possibly 18 degrees in the sunshine, more unpleasant towards the north. But as we go through Monday evening, there could be some difficult driving conditions through rush hour towards the south and west, as we have some heavy spells of rain moving their way northwards. Drier for a time towards the south and east, with some early evening sunshine across Northern Ireland and parts of northwestern England as well. Still a few showers remaining across parts of Scotland, but towards the north, we've still got outbreaks of rain across Orkney and Shetland during Monday night. So through Monday evening and overnight, this band of rain across the Midlands into parts of the southeast of England will continue to push its way northwards and again could be heavy at times. Towards the south, we then see another spell of showers moving through. There'll be some clear spells in between, but generally a mild night with temperatures holding up into the double figures. So to start Tuesday morning, some heavy spells of rain across Northern Ireland, parts of Northern England into Scotland. Towards the south, some sunny spells, but also some frequent showers that could be on the heavy side, especially towards the south and west, mixed in with some sunshine too. Breezy towards the south and towards the far north. Chilly here, but in the sunshine, we could reach highs of 16 or 17. Bye-bye.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. In Tyrone, the A5 is closed in both directions northeast of Strabane for an investigation. The M22 in Antrim is closed in both directions between junctions 1 and 2, between the Dunscilly and Ballygroovy roundabouts because of a security alert causing queues. On the M42 from Staffordshire into Warwickshire, the southbound exit at junction 10 for the A5 at Tamworth is blocked where a lorry's broken down causing delays. In Northamptonshire, the A43 is closed in both directions between Rockingham Road and the A14 north of Kettering after a vehicle went through the central reservation. There are delays, especially on the eastbound A14 towards there. In East Sussex, the A295 is closed along Battle Road in Hailsham for repairs to a burst water main. And also in East Sussex, the A27 is closed each way between Portslade and Shoreham by Sea for an investigation, causing long delays.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Good morning, it's Britain's Newsroom at 10:38.
Well, last week we set you a challenge to raise funds for our nuclear veterans.
That's right. In the 50s and 60s, more than 22,000 British servicemen worked on nuclear tests in Australia and the South Pacific.
Campaigners say they suffered cancers, had children with birth defects because of the impact of the radiation.
The veterans want access to their medical records, compensation and a public inquiry into what happened to them. And the Veterans' Annual Reunion at Pontins was under threat for next year.
Well, they needed £25,000 to make the trip free for the veterans. And you know what? You wonderful people have raised £48,000.
It's brilliant. 90-year-old nuclear vet Terry Washington had this reaction.
How do you feel about GB News viewers raising £46,000 for you?
What a wonderful work they've done on behalf of the National Service people who were involved in Operation Grapple.
Oh, Terry's daughter.
And that lovely dog.
Joins us now, Dr. Jane Washington Evans. Jane, it's so good to see you.
Nice to meet you.
Tell us about your dad. Who is he?
My dad was born in 1934. He's 90 this year. And 70 years ago, 1955, he joined the Royal Navy and ended up on Operation Grapple. His ship was HMS Warrior. And they sailed to the South Pacific and he witnessed 3 H-bomb tests. The third of which my dad is very emotional about when he speaks about. I watched a video of it with him that I found on the Imperial War Museum archives, and this was last year, and he still burst into tears.
Really?
What was significant about the third one?
It was bigger than all the others.
Right. And were they on Christmas Island? Were they on the ship at the time?
He was on the ship,
right.
And he was the engine room writer and scribe. So his handwriting, I assume, and he was saying to me this weekend, will be either in the Admiralty or the Imperial War Museum, documenting all that was happening.
And he's lived to a ripe old age.
Yes.
Has he therefore been lucky with health effects from the tests?
2 things, really. He has had cancer. He had a surgery on a lesion on his head just here and radiotherapy at the Christie Hospital in Manchester. And thankfully, it's turned out really well.
What do you think about the utter abject failure of every government since 72 years to do the right thing, which is what other governments have done in other countries, accept responsibility, accept liability, these were guinea pigs, and pay them some form of compensation?
I totally agree, and also my father would be the first person to agree. The other issue, health-wise, was the psychological impact of seeing one of the most destructive forces unleashed on our planet. And the impact on my dad on that was lifelong, but also many veterans don't mention what they've witnessed. With my father, the impact was it was constantly in his mind, and one of the things that was in his mind was the injustice over compensation. I believe the Isle of Man gave compensation many years ago, Australia, France and America. And one of the things my dad also said, that when the Warrior went through America, they were treated very well. And when they came back through to Britain, they were dismissed.
It's almost like they've slipped under the radar.
Yes.
I mean, to be honest, Jane, when Bev and I talked to Alan, who founded Lab Rats, we sort of were dimly aware of it, but our jaws were dropping when we just heard about the impact on these men's health and the unwillingness of the government to do anything to help them. They've sent them a medal, very nice.
In a jiffy bag.
In a jiffy bag in the post.
It's been shocking. Each government's failed them. Yeah. There's been some great individual MPs over the years. The MP from Norwich between 1997 and onwards, he spoke out every week, well, as much as he could on it.
Was that Ian Gibson?
Yes, it was Ian Gibson.
Yeah.
Thank you for reminding me. And there's been lots of early day motions going back into the 1990s, possibly earlier, that had incredible support. But it always got blocked. And I don't know whether you could even say it got blocked at governments, because there was definitely support from MPs and peers. I suspect it may have been blocked more at the Ministry of Defence level, sadly.
Yeah, because, of course, there should be, if the world was a just place, an extraordinary class action compensation payout here, because what we were hearing on Thursday is that the effects aren't just on this generation, but the children of, the grandchildren of. Brian, who we interviewed, his wife had 13 miscarriages, and he has children and grandchildren who've had all sorts of extraordinary, unusual health and genetic abnormalities.
So far, so good. I've been lucky, but I only found out when my mum was dying herself that she'd also had miscarriages, and she'd not told me.
Yeah.
Did she have more than one?
So I believe, yeah. So, yeah.
You're wearing your medal, the
Yes,
Lab Rats medal.
yes.
How important is it that this charity continues to make the case for these men and also to get their holiday?
Lab Rats have been absolutely outstanding and an outstanding support for me. It's not been an easy few years. My mum passed in 2018. My partner passed in 2022. My dad is really quite ill and frail now. But he's doing well. He's got loads of vim and vigour. But he's frail. And last year, we went to the cenotaph. I was hoping that we'd be able to go this year, but it doesn't look as though it's possible. But he was quite anxious last year, and we were all massing up. And Susan, who works with Alan for Lab Rats, Susan Musselwhite, hugged him, and that meant the world to me, and gave him that confidence again to go out there and walk.
Will he be well enough to go
Day.
to Pontins, do you think, next year?
I hope so. I hope so. He expressed the desire to, and he said he would love to see fellow veterans again. One of the things he said, firstly, when I heard about the 47 to £8,000 now that's been raised, is that he didn't say about himself. He said it's a shame that his friends and other colleagues who are no longer here haven't been able to...
well, that's the terribly cynical part of all this. Governments just know that, unfortunately, these wonderful old men are dying off.
Yeah,
Same with the
it was a
infected
similar
blood scandal.
and with the post office scandal as well.
Same. Yeah. And yet this new government has passed. They're passing the Hillsborough. They're calling it a duty of candour on public bodies. There needs to be a duty of candour on the Ministry of Defence. It's obvious what happened to those men, and they are entitled to some recompense.
Exactly, and also those that have been requesting their medical records. I went through a period of attempting to access my dad's medical records for him, and in each point it went on to a different area, and then there comes a point when you can't keep following it through. You've got to get on with other things, and plus think about him in the present as well.
Of course. Jane, just briefly, you banned trophy hunting. That's your campaign, isn't it, as well? You do good in the world.
Thank you for mentioning that.
Yeah, no, I do remember.
Well, you were with Lord Ashcroft the other day, who's big into banning trophy hunting.
Yeah.
Yes, I spoke to him a couple of times at conference.
Yeah, he's big into that.
Yeah, we're hoping to bring the bill back this session. Sue Heyman, Baroness Heyman, is very positive about doing it. And I spoke to Henry Smith recently, who the Conservative former MP for Crawley, who was absolutely championed this with John Speller, who often is on this show as well. They both are, actually, aren't
Great.
they?
And now you have been too. We really appreciate your time this morning. Thank you so much.
Jane Washington Evans, whose dad was one of those lab rats, which is exactly what they were.
Keep donating. They'll find a way to make these old blokes enjoy this money in some way, don't you worry.
Now, there's the QR code in the corner screen. Bev will explain it, because I really don't know what a QR code does.
Get your phone out, get your camera out. You can scan the QR code there, and that will take you to the website with all the details of how you can make a donation, or if that's a little bit too complicated.
Which it was for me.
And I don't blame you. Go to the website. You can go to gofundme.com, and then if you search for Nuclear Test Veterans Reunion, that photo will come up. That is the page, and I know they would really appreciate it.
And wouldn't it be fabulous if we could get it to 50,000?
It really would. It'd be great. Right, why is Britain the European home for illegal migrants? And should you be worried
Yes.
about it? This
Yes.
is Britain's Newsroom, live across the UK on GB News.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
And we've got a treat not only to have you here, but you've brought loads of exclusives for us this morning.
Well,
your
I had
chat
to.
with Robert Jenrick.
Just for you, Ellie. Yeah, Robert Jenrick, of course, is the front runner to be Tory leader.
He is now, yeah.
Amongst Tory MPs, yeah. And he's been talking to us for my podcast, Chopper's Political Podcast, about immigration, about criminals being released from prison. Also, really importantly,
most importantly, some would say.
Yeah, biscuits. Now,
biscuits.
He was. I should explain to viewers. Robert Jenrick, during the COVID pandemic, had to pull together a hamper of goods for those isolating, and he put in a special biscuit.
Yes.
Here's what he had to say on the podcast. Before we move on to the future and what your plans are, your biggest achievement in government, what do you reckon it was? I know what it was.
Well, you go first.
Yeah, custard creams.
I thought you were going to say that I saved a penny. That was another one of our campaigns, yeah.
But custard creams, briefly, I mean, you were the community secretary. You had to provide food boxes during the COVID pandemic, and what did you put into those food boxes?
Custard creams, the people's favourite biscuit.
What else is there? The people's favourite biscuit. Now, across the country...
Yes,
well,
Aidan.
Coffees are being dropped across the country.
Yeah,
is that really the people's favourite biscuit, Aidan?
Listen, you'll never change my opinion. I like shortbread, but I like it homemade. With a sprinkling of sugar. Listen, I'm type 1 diabetic. I had to be quite moderate in terms of my intake. But goodness me,
I mean,
a nice cup of tea.
that's a good one.
It's
That's
about the
a good
shape as
answer.
well. If you show, some more intelligent biscuit companies, they will make shapes of biscuit that fit into the tea. It's nothing worse than when you put it into a narrow cup and it won't
go in, will it? You can't hit the.
So you like the triangular?
Not really
shortbread?
Fingers.
Just something a bit elongated that I can turn sideways and dip in like that.
Got you.
GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
(10:51). This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Can you believe this? I can quite easily. Britain has the most illegal migrants of any other European country. Listen to this figure.
Everyone. Sorry, it's not funny, but you sort of have to laugh because you can't work out how we've got here.
I can.
Everyone in 100 person in this country is here illegally, according to Oxford University research.
So that means there must be at least one out there is illegal. I know which one we're going to kick out.
But if you think about, like, any high school with 1,000 kids in it, 100 of them are... No, hang on, don't call...
Don't
10
do
of them...
maths.
Sorry,
10,
I'm sorry, I'm terrible at maths. 10 of them state educated. 10 of them will be here illegally and 1,000 people in a school.
It is a point. How did we get in this situation? Well, let's ask our next guest, who is the former head of the UK Border Force, Tony Smith. Tony Smith, much of this must have happened on your watch. It's all your fault, Tony. Sorry to blame you.
Of course it is, Andrew. Of course it's my fault. Yeah, these figures are quite old, actually. I've been digging around a bit since you called me. These are 2017 figures. You can speak to Migration Watch, are probably the best informed on UK figures. It's probably about double that now, actually.
Oh, God.
It's probably about... Yeah, because we think it's going up about 70,000 a year since 2017, if you take into account the ones we don't know about, that we estimate don't come to Home Office. But I mean, I think probably, the more informed commentators would tell you it's probably about 1.5 million people may well be in this country illegally. I mean, we say illegally, they may have entered illegally, of course, but they are now in this position where they've claimed permission to stay from the Home Office and they're in a backlog. So, they're not necessarily sort of immediately removable. But yeah, it is a quite high number, I think, compared with other countries. Yeah, definitely.
Tony, I can remember when Boris Johnson was Mayor of London, one of his ideas was to give an amnesty to illegal migrants, and I think the figure was 500,000 in London.
Yeah,
outrageous. We want to kick them out.
We're not good at these things. I mean, if you look at the EU settlement scheme, after Brexit, Europeans were allowed to stay. The estimate, there were 3 million here. Actually, about 7 million in the end applied under EU settlement to stay. So we're not really good because we don't have a biometric entry-exit system in this country. We don't actually check people in and check people out like they do in the States. The EU are starting that next month with the entry-exit scheme. So we do check people in, and even then, Andrew, people coming through e-gates, we let lots of nationalities through the e-gate, which can't ask you any questions, doesn't assess your...
You know what, Tony? They'll find a way. They'll find a way. You can have a biometric system at the airport, but they're not coming on the airplanes anyway, so they'll still find a way to get round any sort of biometric system that we all then get enslaved to. But the crooks will always find a way.
But Tony, anyway, the new Labour government's going to smash the gang, so that's all right.
We can all sleep safe at night. We've got to go. So we've run out of time, Tony. I'm so sorry. Tony Smith there, former head of the UK Border Force. Let us know your thoughts. I'm sure you will.
Blimmin' outrageous. And tell us how outraged you are, because we are both outraged. This is Britain's Newsroom.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. It's going to be a case of sunny spells, scattered showers today. We still have some rain in Scotland before turning colder later on in the week. So we've got some heavy spells of rain persisting across northern Scotland. That will gradually move its way northwards. But across much of England and Wales and Northern Ireland, it's a case of sunny spells, scattered showers developing through the afternoon. We've already got a band across northern parts of England, but the showers could turn heavy, possibly with the odd rumble of thunder too, but highs up to 17, possibly 18 degrees in the sunshine, more unpleasant towards the north. But as we go through Monday evening, there could be some difficult driving conditions through rush hour towards the south and west, as we have some heavy spells of rain moving their way northwards. Drier for a time towards the south and east, with some early evening sunshine across Northern Ireland and parts of northwestern England as well. Still a few showers remaining across parts of Scotland, but towards the north, we've still got outbreaks of rain across Orkney and Shetland during Monday night. So through Monday evening and overnight, this band of rain across the Midlands into parts of the southeast of England will continue to push its way northwards, and again could be heavy at times. Towards the south, we then see another spell of showers moving through. There'll be some clear spells in between, but generally a mild night with temperatures holding up into the double figures. So to start Tuesday morning, some heavy spells of rain across Northern Ireland, parts of northern England into Scotland. Towards the south, some sunny spells, but also some frequent showers that could be on the heavy side, especially towards the south and west, mixed in with some sunshine too. Breezy towards the south and towards the far north. Chilly here, but in the sunshine, we could reach highs of 16 or 17. Bye-bye.
We can expect clear skies, leading to a light and warm day ahead. Lovely. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good luck. Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news,
Will, please bring us up to date.
or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons,
Very, very curious.
we bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Why go out on a Friday night when Friday night comes straight to your home?
Talking about.
Join me and my A-team of top pundits. Chemistry tonight is electric. As we tackle the big stories of the day with wit, insight and fearless energy.
Man of the people.
It's all vibe.
Just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
So, order in Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, every Friday at 8, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Morning, 11 a.m. on Monday, the 7th of October, live across the UK. This is Britain's Newsroom with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Good morning, thanks for joining us. So Sue Gray's reduced payday. Sue Gray is sacked as the PM's Chief of Staff, but apparently she's going to end up in the House of Lords. Christopher Hope has more.
Sue Gray has gone, but will it restore order to a chaotic Downing Street?
Memorials are taking place across Britain and the Middle East on the anniversary of Hamas's terror attack on Israel. Earlier, the Foreign Secretary David Lammy said this.
The worst attack on the Jewish community since the Holocaust, and of course thinking about the many hostages.
Britain is officially the home of illegal migrants. New research shows that 1 person in every 100 of the population is an illegal migrant, although we just spoke to somebody who said by now it might be as many as 1 in 50.
God help us. And Britain's pothole plague is going to get even worse. The problem costs the government £14 billion a year. But there's already been 500,000 call-outs in 2024 alone.
And your nuclear veterans, well, they need you. You have raised almost £50,000 to fund the annual reunion for the British servicemen who took part in nuclear tests in the 1950s and 60s. We are enormously grateful. Lots to talk about this morning. gbnews.com/your say. Let us know your thoughts. First, though, the very latest news with Sophie Reaper.
Thank you, Bev. It's just after 11 o'clock and these are your latest headlines. This morning, people across Israel have gathered to mark the one-year anniversary of the October 7th attacks. In Jerusalem, Israelis carrying flags and placards with the faces of missing people gathered outside President Netanyahu's home. At 6:29 local time, a siren rang out to mark the hour that Hamas-led militants launched rockets into Israel last October 7th. According to Israeli figures, they killed some 1,200 people and took about 250 hostages to Gaza. Earlier, Foreign Secretary David Lammy visited a synagogue in North London to mark 1 year since the attack on Israel. Joined by Chief Rabbi to the UK, Rabbi Ephraim Mervis, they commemorated those who lost their lives 1 year ago. This is what David Lammy had to say.
It is a day of deep reflection and pain, thinking about October the 7th, the worst attack on the Jewish community since the Holocaust, and of course thinking about the many hostages that are still held in Gaza and their loved ones and the pain, and particularly we think of Emily Damari, the British hostage, and her family have no word of her fate or how she is doing.
New polling carried out on behalf of the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism has found what they called concerning levels of support for Hamas among young people in Britain. The YouGov poll found that 9% of 18 to 24-year-olds in the UK had a so-called favourable view of Hamas, compared to 3% across the general public. Parliament is set to return today following a recess for the various party conferences which have been taking place for the past few weeks. MPs will be back at Westminster today, but their return coincides with further controversy for the government after the PM's Chief of Staff, Sue Gray, quit her job yesterday. This has prompted Sir Keir to reshuffle his staff, with the leader of Labour's general election campaign, Morgan McSweeney, taking on the Chief of Staff role instead. Earlier, Foreign Office Minister Hamish Falconer defended Labour's so-called shaky start in government.
I don't at all accept in the first 100 days that this government has been a disaster. We've made real progress across a whole range of issues. I think it's been full of difficult choices which reflect the difficult inheritance that we've got as we've become the government. But I think Keir Starmer and the rest of the government is getting on with the job that the British public elected us to do.
A protest will be held outside Parliament later on today following the government's controversial decision to scrap the winter fuel allowance for pensioners. Last month, Labour voted to cut the benefit for all but the poorest pensioners, although the Unite union has argued this would only save around £1.4 billion per year. The union are now encouraging people to speak out and join them as they lobby the government to reverse the decision to make these cuts ahead of the winter months. One person has been killed and several others injured by an explosion at a block of flats in the Scottish town of Alloa. At around 6 o'clock last night, fire and emergency crews were called to the residential property after reports of an explosion. A man was pronounced dead at the scene and 3 others were taken to the Forth Valley Royal Infirmary for treatment of minor injuries. The trial for Daniel Khalif is scheduled to begin at Woolwich Crown Court in London today. Khalif stands charged with committing various terror offences while serving in the British Army, but also made headlines last year after allegedly escaping from Wandsworth Prison and spending 4 days on the run. A mass manhunt was carried out for the former soldier last September until he was recaptured and returned to prison. And finally, a cost hearing will be taking place at the Royal Courts of Justice today as part of the Wagatha Christie libel case between Colleen Rooney and Rebecca Vardy. Following the ruling in 2022, which found Vardy had leaked Rooney's private information to the press, it was ordered she would have to pay 90% of Rooney's legal costs. But now the battle rumbles on as questions are asked on both sides about which costs should reasonably be paid. Those are your latest GB News headlines for now. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Very good morning. Welcome to Britain's Newsroom, live across the UK on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Beth Turner.
Lots of people can get in touch.
This is where I do my secretary bit again. Anything else you'd like me to do, Mr. Pearce, while I'm doing this?
Well,
Tea?
the producer printed them off.
They're very busy making sure that our show doesn't fall apart.
That's very true.
While we're gossiping and nattering. Right, let's be professional and grown up for just a moment. It is a Monday morning. You have been staying at home, right? Let's have a look. Dennis has said... Dorothy says, King Charles, do the right thing and vote for no confidence in this government. It is embarrassing having all this dreadful, embarrassing government be placed on TV with all their dirty washing being highlighted worldwide. They do seem to be a bit of a joke, don't they? Stephen has said, Lammy with a robotic statement without compassion or sincerity. What an absolute embarrassment to the real people of the UK. That was David Lammy there making a statement about the fact that it's October the 7th today.
Yeah. I wonder if he's going to make a statement about giving away the Chego silence, which broke while we were on air.
Well, he did. Well, no, he hasn't, has he?
I mean, the Commons wasn't even sitting.
No.
It is extraordinary.
Yeah, it is. It is
old-fashioned, but a major statement. The first territory we've given away since Hong Kong in 1997. We've given it to Mauritius, which is seen as a client state of China. Well, Hong Kong went well with China, didn't it?
Quite. Well, John has said on the discussion of illegal migrants as well this morning, and as mentioned on the programme, that 973 people arrived on the shore The Labour Party doesn't care. That isn't the phrase that you use, John, but I can't read that out on TV. And welcomes them into our country, paying everything for them, while the Labour Party are quite happy to cut the pensioners' winter fuel allowance by £300. It's typical of this country. Let's look after everybody else around the world and forget our own. Anyone who voted for the Labour Party, you should be disgusted with yourself.
Well, it's early days, but they haven't covered themselves in glory. Normally, you'd expect there to be a grid, so the first 100 days they hit the ground running. Afterward, they'd had a couple of years to prepare, because it was pretty obvious the Tories were heading for defeat, whatever. And yet, there was no plan. And wasn't that what Sue Gray was supposed to do, or Morgan McSweeney, this Svengali figure who's taking over from her?
Elaine has said, there's no hope for the UK now. I'm not paying into the system anymore. I'm going to rent out my flat. I'm going to live in a caravan. I'm not funding an invasion. And that's the problem, isn't it? That so much... We have been a compassionate country over the years. We've always welcomed people who are living in war-torn countries. Particularly, I would take more women and children if we had the choice, to be completely honest, in some of those countries. But our patience now, it feels like our compassion is growing very thin.
There was a story in the papers the other day, 1 in 50 of Albanians who are here are in prison. Right, boot them out. We've got a return agreement with the ones who crossed the channel. There's no war in Albania. There's no conflict in Albania. Kick them out, send them back. Why do we want them in our prisons?
Yeah. Well, absolutely. Ian has said Christians and Muslims need to set up lobby groups. There are only 300,000 Jews in the UK. However, they're very effective. Most politicians will be affiliated or aware of the lobbying groups. It can be lucrative with holidays thrown in. Not belonging to one does have serious consequences for a political career. Anyway, what else have you been saying here? Let me have a quick look.
Quite interesting. At the party conferences, they all have stands and stalls, and I noticed there were Labour Friends of Israel, Labour Friends of Pakistan, Labour Friends of India, same with the Tories. But you don't get Tory Friends of Christians or Labour Friends of Christians. The Christian voice just not heard. No, just not heard. Although there is a group... Christians in the Conservative Party.
There's got to be.
And I spoke at their fringe event last week, actually.
Dennis has said laughing and hand-wringing about illegal immigrants is obviously not the answer. Police our borders effectively, and in turn, all would-be illegals indefinitely in Spartan accommodation, no hotels ever until they're returned where they came from. There should be no exceptions. We're basically in a wartime situation, and emergency measures can no longer be delayed.
Don't forget, though, the Labour government, they're going to smash the gangs.
There's not a lot of smashing going on, is there, at the moment? Let's recap on the story this morning about Sue Gray has quit.
No, she's been fired. No doubt about it. She was fired on Thursday. She was told, I was writing this in the mail today, she was told on Thursday by the Prime Minister, it's not working, what do you want to do? So they found a new job for her, which is a non-existent job. She's envoy to the regions. You think, what, the regions of where? Uzbekistan? No, the regions of the UK. Liverpool, Manchester. They've got elected mayors.
They've got really good mayors in the regions.
And they rather like her.
Yeah, they do like her.
So it's a fig leaf to cover her embarrassment over the fact she's probably I don't think there's ever been a Chief of Staff fired so quickly in a new government elected with a landslide.
Well, someone had to go, didn't they? Someone had to go, and it wasn't going to be Keir Starmer. Let's go to GBNews' political editor, Christopher Hope. Christopher, have we just hit peak cynicism here, that we think she's been thrown to the walls in order to just have somebody take the flak for the expenses, sort of scandal, you might call it?
Hi, Andrew. Hi, Bev. Well, you might think that. I mean, I think that this issue here with Sue Gray, many viewers and listeners won't know who she is, and nor should she. But she's a symptom, I think, of a failure by the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, to get a grip on this new administration. It marks 100 days next month. There was a bit of a pace behind the government, wasn't there, in those sitting days in Parliament back in July, but they lost the grip on the whole Parliament, on the whole news operation through August, and they've failed to re-establish that after the battle, the rows about the claims the money he's been given, the spectacles, the suits, and the free use of flats, and it's a real issue for this government, I think. The issue of lack of there's no planned news being now on October 30th, I was told 10 days ago, and that blame for that goes down to Sue Gray, who was the Chief of Staff. But I think this new person, Morgan McSweeney, a key ally of Sir Keir Starmer, was a former, of course, Chief of Staff when he's not opposition, doesn't know government that well, and that could be a problem. But I think, Andrew, in many ways, the symptom of the problems goes back to that article on page 1 of the Mail about 10 days ago, when you had photographs of a heated debate, a conversation in a Down Street garden between Sue Gray and a civil servant working for Sir Keir Starmer. The fact that that was leaking out meant that her days were numbered.
Yeah, and it was clearly a heated exchange. It was in a Downing Street garden, and it was Michael Bourne who was the Principal Private Secretary to the Cabinet Secretary, Simon Case. So she was at war with Simon Case, the Cabinet Secretary, at war with just about everybody in Number 10. Someone told me she'd crossed the street to have a fight with somebody rattling a tin for a charity. She just can't seem to not get into conflict with people. But there is a sense, Chris, talking to some people, that she has been thrown under a bus here, because Morgan McSweeney, who is this great now political Svengali who takes over, what was he doing when all these mistakes were being made? Why didn't he intervene?
Well, we don't know why he didn't intervene. I mean, maybe some friends of his were supporting the leaking against Sue Gray. Right. I mean, as an observer, I thought it made a bit of sense having someone, a seasoned Whitehall veteran, coming in to run the kind of Whitehall operation for Starmer, given that no one's been in power for Labour in 14 years, and leave Morgan McSweeney to do the campaigning work. What's happened here? She's lost that battle, but there are so many roles that aren't yet filled. They haven't got a permanent national security advisor. They're waiting for a new UK ambassador to Washington. That's so important with security issues and with our commitment to the special relationship. And now we have, I think they may have appointed a private secretary to the Prime Minister to help run his diary. It seems chaotic. I should say, though, the Tories shouldn't relax too much. This is a 5-year government. We're barely 100 days in. I think this will sort itself out. They've got some senior players coming in to the media operation. That will help. And pretty soon, I think, this may get back on track. But we are seeing, I think, the weakness of this Prime Minister as not being political enough in a very difficult political environment.
There's a similarity here with Rishi Sunak, I think, Chris. They both got elected in 2015. Rishi Sunak wasn't very political and at times looked embarrassingly inexperienced and naive. And I think we're seeing the same with Keir Starmer. Someone said to me yesterday, for the piece I wrote today, he doesn't understand the Labour Party. He doesn't get how it works. He doesn't have a political instinct. He needs people around him who have political instincts. But it's very worrying that we have a Prime Minister who doesn't have strong instincts like we had with Margaret Thatcher or even Blair, to give him credit.
That's right. It seems to be a lack of narrative. I mean, you can compare back to 2019 when Boris Johnson came in. He did two things he promised to voters, didn't he? He said, I'll stop Jeremy Corbyn running this country and I'll sort out Brexit. Well, he did that within 40 days. And then he kind of ran out of ideas and he got swamped by COVID and, of course, fighting and backing the Ukraine against the Russian invasion. With this new Labour government, his idea, Sir Keir Starmer, was, I will stop the Tories making a mess of things. Well, he did that, and did he ever, with that huge majority. But then what? I can't see what the clear narrative is of this government. And if anything else, Morgan McSweeney might give him that, because he was a campaigner. He delivered that manifesto with his campaigning on that very small number of people voting for Labour. 1 in 3 of those who voted back Labour in the election, don't forget, 1 in 5 of all adults. So maybe he might give an idea of what this government's for, and that could be a good starting point.
What do we know about Morgan McSweeney, if he's going to play such an important role now in policy and planning? What are his political allegiances? Like, obviously he's on the left, but is he hard left? Is he more of a centrist politician?
No. He's certainly more centrist, Bev. He was someone who helped Sir Keir Starmer fight off the Corbynista threat. He's schooled in the battles in East London against the far left. He's somebody who can give a narrative, I think, to this government from the centre-left. But the question is, can he get a grip on government? He has no experience of Whitehall, how it works. Don't forget Simon Case, pictured arriving at work today on a walking stick. He is leaving work soon. He's standing down as a Cabinet Secretary industry hasn't been very well for the past year or so. There are a lot of key jobs that haven't yet been filled. The question is, can Morgan McSweeney find people to work and get behind this Prime Minister? It's hard to imagine, hard to credit really, the chaos, I think, at the heart of government and how that's being seen across the rest of the operation. Next week we've got this 100th days anniversary of this government. Lots of people will write up how it's going, and also a major investment summit, which, if you believe reports in the Financial Times and elsewhere, isn't going that well either. So big issues.
And the budget, of course. Remind us when that is, Chris.
Yeah. Well, the budget's huge. The budget has a kind of will set the tone for the next 5 years. Already we're hearing that they might delay this VAT increase on private school fees. Will that non-dom crackdown actually bring in the money they want? There's all sorts of concerns going into that budget, but it is seen by many close to the Prime Minister as setting the entire tone for the next 5 years. Don't forget, we haven't yet got a Tory leader. They'll get to 2 candidates by Thursday and a final selection of somebody by the 2nd of November. So all of these problems for this government have taken place without any formal, proper opposition, which makes you wonder how on earth it can get any better for them at the moment.
Okay. All right, Chris. That's Chris Hope, our political editor. Up next, are the relatives of the English writer Virginia Woolf really upset about a proposed Barbie? Well, who better to tell us than Emma Woolf, who's part of that very distinguished literary family.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Jubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
We are now delighted to be joined by comedian and my beautiful friend, Francine Lewis, who's here to share with us her upcoming book, The Last Laugh, and an exciting competition in collaboration with none other than that mean Simon Cowell. Francine,
he's not so mean anymore.
Oh, is he not?
He's not. And do you know what?
He's having a child, is it maybe?
Definitely. It's really weird because I really liked Simon. He was nasty. I just found that, I don't know, quite sexy. Now he's way too nice. Way too nice.
That's what they say, isn't it? You get all the nice guys say, I never get any luck with women. And they always say I'm too nice.
Do you know what? The truth is, I've always thought Simon was lovely. He's such a nice guy. Like, when I was doing Britain's Got Talent, I was very, very excited, you know, to meet Simon again because it was the second time I'd actually met him. And I always thought he was such a charming, lovely man.
Of course, you are more recently well known for BGT and your impressions and whatnot.
Do you know what? I do watch a lot of reality TV, a lot of that sort of stuff.
What do you watch?
I love Towie. Whenever it's Love Island's on. Seriously, honeys, 100% definitely. You got to watch Essie. It's all about Towie. Love it, seriously. So I'm always doing, you know, whatever the new reality shows are.
The favourite is Katie Price, and we've got a video. I think we've got a selfie video of us doing.
Have we?
Yeah, we have. From
I'm showing
years ago.
Tatiana to Katie Price, which she does amazingly. Come on, Tatiana, let's...
No, I don't.
Tatiana!
Katie, there's a mixture between Katie Price and Tatiana.
What do you think? I love when people take me off. It shows what a big star I am.
It's the lick of the lips.
The People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes. Thank you for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's 11:22. This is Britain's Newsroom live across the UK with Bev Turner and Andrew Piss. Thank you for joining us.
Emma Wolf's here, and former Labour advisor Matthew Talk is in the studio. I'm going to tease you again, Matthew, just saying you must be so pleased with that thing before your name, former Labour advisor.
No, I'm honestly not. I was saying to Emma, just in the green room...
I think they need you, Matt.
Well, yeah, I don't know. They could be doing a manner of other things that are better than this. I just think it's the thing that makes me sad is, you know, I should have been excited about all this, and I wasn't, because I knew this was going to happen. These people that Keir surrounds himself with, perfectly affable, I get on with many of them.
Are you saying they're not up to it?
Loads of them aren't up to it. I was saying this morning...
What about Morgan McSweeney, who is this new, all hoping... He ran his leadership campaign, he ran the general election campaign, but I could have run the general election campaign, and I've never won one before, because the Tories were always going to lose it, because they were so hopeless, and people were so fed up with them.
No, I agree. It's, you know, there was no...
What's he like? Who is he?
Morgan. He was a bit aloof with me.
Why?
Well, I came to him with ideas he didn't want to do because I was left-wing. I wasn't putting forward left-wing ideas. I came forward with ideas that I thought would help the party for what he was trying to do. I've always...
How sad that you get pigeonholed.
But what's he like, though?
He's quiet, he's diminutive, he's, you know... I do laugh when, you know, we have this bizarre thing in politics where he's a hard man, or he's took on the BNP in the... He ran a campaign, you know, he's not gone out on the streets with the pitchfork.
He's the one that's in at 7 in the morning, doesn't leave till midnight.
Yeah. Which is to be expected, but there's a lot of the special advisors who are going, well, yeah, this is hard work. What am I doing here? You know, this is... And how much money, and... We all knew this, or you should have been prepared, but, you know, there was training put on by the party at the time, by the Institute for Government, and I think the problem is the politicians at fault in a way, because there's an element of loyalty to your staff, and a lot of them, not all, but a lot of them, I think, are promoted beyond their means, and therefore are taken into government absolutely not ready. And what you will see is there'll be a large churn. There always is in every government. There'll be a large churn of staff over the first 12 months because they're burnt out, they can't handle it, and they can't wait.
And being in opposition is completely different to being in government.
Dead easy.
It's a different skill set.
From the... Yeah, that's what they'll probably say about me sat on here. It's easy for me to criticise from the sidelines because I'm no longer in it. But, but I did always think there's an over-egging of the pudding. You're having to go at Rishi Sunak for getting in a helicopter. Do you not think you'll have to maybe do that at some point at a critical moment? Or, you know, I think the problem is he's surrounded himself with people that are really out of touch. And that isn't a factional thing. That's not a left or right thing.
That's a class thing.
It's middle class, privately educated, mostly men whose experiences aren't grounded in reality, unfortunately.
And because the dispute...
It's more than that. There's a lot of hypocrisy. We've heard so much from Angela Rayner, and then we hear today that actually she was buying her boyfriend £3,000 suits. You know, she has made out that she's the kind of the socialist, the working class. She's the poster girl for the working class.
Yeah, but I don't know about that, because that sort of stuff, I think... I would always argue champagne socialists, even socialists are allowed champagne, you know, once upon a time, if they do all right. But if I think when there's enough, you know, she's done well. She wants to buy herself some nice suits, or a boyfriend a nice suits. Well, why not?
She did have a bit of help from Lord Ali.
No, this one she didn't. I would defend. This was her own money.
Yeah, but in a sense, if you've had £3,500 worth of clothes from Lord Ali, then you can spend £3,000 on it.
Maybe
you've already got a huge
fair enough. You do have a choice.
And you know, when I saw that picture of her raving, or whatever you call it, in that nightclub in Ibiza, I thought, how much did that cost you? Not a penny. 840 quid, that freebie. Why isn't she giving it back if Starmer's giving back his freebies?
Well, it was somebody's birthday, actually, I think she was out there for. But the thing with that, again, and I felt a bit unfair, I've got a lot of time for Angela. She grew up on the same estate as me, and she's a nice woman that cares, genuinely.
Yeah.
The problem with it was, she I think, wants the normal life. You've chosen to be Deputy Prime Minister, you're not going to get that. So I couldn't help but think, in principle, great, normal person, having a rave in Ibiza. You're the Deputy Prime Minister, and we've just cut winter fuel allowance and 10,000 children in poverty.
There's a lack of seriousness there. You know, if you're going to step up to that one of the top jobs, you can't then be raving in Ibiza. We all have to give up, you know, the fun stuff when we become grown-up.
What happened in Finland with their Prime Minister? She lasted 2 minutes after being out and about and being seen normally in the club. So, you know,
it was so destructive.
I agree.
Emma, we've got to talk to you about Virginia Woolf. Now, remind people how you are related.
So, Virginia is my great-aunt, so she's my father's aunt. My father, who died in his early 90s, was close to Virginia and Leonard. Right. He was the last surviving person who knew Virginia and Leonard. And so, yeah. Virginia's my great aunt.
And for people who don't know, amazing writer, one of the best
Wonderful writer.
female writers of
Very,
all time.
very progressive, sort of modernist writer of the early 20th century. Very important in terms of the development of literature, this stream of consciousness thing. Before that, not to be boring, but before that, the Victorians, you know, Dickens, Trollope, it was all inside. It was all sort of the externals, the plots and the storylines. Virginia Woolf took it, inside the head. She wrote about how it feels to be a human being. She wrote about how it feels to move through your day, and to sit on the bus and be thinking about something in your own private life.
I don't think I've almost never sat down at a computer to do some work without thinking about a room of her own.
A room of one's own, exactly.
A room of one's own,
yeah.
Because as women, particularly, the idea was that we were barred from creativity, particularly writing, because we never had a private space. Men could go to their little office and sit down, and women never had a room of their own.
Just the independence, the room of one's own and £500 a year. That's all she wanted, and she was so independent. And what's really, really interesting about Virginia is that she's still so well known. We're talking about her in GB News, and yet no one has read her. She's a difficult writer.
Yeah.
There's a couple of the people in the studio who've asked me, what should I start with? And they're difficult books, but they're very rewarding.
Yeah.
Most people have done to the Lighthouse at university or something like that. But yeah.
Let's remind people why we're talking about it. Why are we talking about her?
We're talking about her today because the Times are reporting that Barbie wanted to make a doll. They wanted to make a Barbie doll of Virginia Woolf, which is really quite funny because you've got this difficult, complex, tortured soul. She committed suicide in 1941. Yeah, you've got it there, Bev. Barbie, apparently, Mattel, the Barbie company, wanted to make a Barbie doll of Virginia Woolf, which is just kind of a huge contradiction. This pinky, plasticky, pneumatic Barbie doll of a woman who was the ultimate feminist, the ultimate progressive.
And they've also managed to make her look like Queen Camilla.
Yeah. The weird thing is they refer to the entire family being aghast, saying, over my dead body. Well, I can tell you here and now, they didn't consult the Woolf family. They didn't consult me or my father or anyone. So it's an odd story, but it's getting a lot of interest. People are saying, a Barbie doll of Virginia Woolf. Also, who buys Barbies?
But I was just about to say, but people who buy Barbies have never heard of Virginia Woolf.
No, exactly.
Have they? Am I being patronising?
I don't know. I think Barbie...
Or most people.
I think it's Barbie collectors now. I don't think the average 10-year-old... I mean, the average 10-year-old doesn't buy Barbie dolls anymore.
Doesn't read.
But do your 10-year-old girls, did any of your daughters...
They don't read books, I can tell you that.
Matthew's looking curiously
it's a funny one.
phased out of this one here. Are you a Virginia Woolf reader?
To my shame, no. I would say I'm a feminist. I haven't read any Virginia Woolf, which maybe takes my credentials away from me.
But why have you heard of her? Isn't it weird?
Yeah. No, it's true.
Taxi drivers have heard of her. There's a Virginia Woolf burger bar in the centre of London.
Yeah.
Why is she so popular and no one's read her?
There's a very famous film called Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf?
Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf? It's gone into pop culture, and yet people don't know her work.
Yeah.
It's very odd.
And maybe that's why she's been chosen as the person to...
And there was
they know she's a feminist.
And there was a very famous film when she, with Nicole Kidman...
Yeah, The Hours.
The Hours.
Yeah. And everyone says to me, I love The Hours, and I'm saying, it's nothing. She didn't write The Hours. She wrote The Years, and it's based on a novel by Virginia Woolf. But yeah, it's always the films that are far more popular than the work.
But do her books still tick over in sales?
They do, yeah. And they're still,
they're all still on all the academic and the curriculum.
They're still on the curriculum, where they've survived, where they haven't been...
What would she think about being made a Barbie?
That's the thing. I think Virginia and Leonard would be amused by this. I think they would think it was very, very funny, because they both had a brilliant sense of humour.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Right, Matthew, Emma, thank you so much. Right, we're going to go to Sophie Reaper with your news. Here she is.
A very good morning to you. It's just after 11:30 and these are your latest GB News headlines. This morning, people across Israel have gathered to mark the one-year anniversary of the October 7th attacks. At the Knesset building in Jerusalem, flags were lowered to half-mast in commemoration of victims to the attack. According to Israeli figures, Hamas killed some 1,200 people and took about 250 hostages to Gaza. Parliament is set to return today following a recess for the various party conferences which have been taking place for the past few weeks. MPs will be back at Westminster today, but their return coincides with further controversy for the government after the PM's Chief of Staff, Sue Gray, quit her job yesterday. This has prompted Sir Keir to reshuffle his staff, with the leader of Labour's general election campaign, Morgan McSweeney, taking on the Chief of Staff role instead.
Earlier, Shadow Leader of the House of Commons, Chris Philp, told GB News Breakfast that this is just one example of Labour chaos. New analysis has found that 10,000 children have fallen into poverty as a result of the two-child child benefit limit since Labour took office. The data comes from the Child Poverty Action Group, who say the policy must be abolished. However, the government says this cannot happen due to the state of the UK's public finances. And a costs hearing is taking place at the Royal Court of Justice today as part of the Wagatha Christie libel case between Colleen Rooney and Rebecca Vardy. Following the ruling in 2022, which found Vardy had leaked Rooney's private information to the press, it was ordered that she would have to pay 90% of Rooney's legal costs. But now the battle rumbles on as questions are asked on both sides about which costs should reasonably be paid. Those are your latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sophie Reaper. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
But first, here's a quick look at today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.3102 and €1.949. The price of gold is £2,021.52 per ounce, and the FTSE 100's at 8,273.90 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Up at noon, good afternoon, Britain, with Emily and
Ben Leo today. Yes, Tom's taking a day off, but Ben Leo will be with me. Sorry, he's not here
He's probably
quite
recovering from conferences.
Well, Tom, yes. I mean, he was very busy indeed.
But they didn't give me a day off.
Were you at all of them?
All of them.
All of them.
I didn't go to the Lib Dem one because I could not put myself through such purgatory. I just could not. I did them when they were in coalition because they were in government, but I can't bear the sanctimony.
I mean, it's tiring. It must be tiring doing all of the conferences.
Yeah,
because it's an early start and it's a late finish.
I was feeling a bit jealous being in the studio. I don't know about you, Bev, but then to be honest, bit of a slog up there, isn't it?
It's also you get a conference throat, we call it, because you're in air-conditioned rooms all the time. The Labour conference were 30,000 people accredited. That's a small town.
Wow, that's a lot, isn't it?
And it was about 12,000 for the Tories. Measure of how far the Tories have fallen.
Well, yes, actually, they certainly need to rebuild. But interesting today, everyone's back to the Commons, back to work, but a huge clean out of number 10. I mean, it's quite remarkable, isn't it? 100 days in, that so many people, there's such a, reconfiguration
Cabinet
of
Secretary's on his way out, Graves on the way out. She was fired, by the way. She didn't resign. She was fired.
There's this talk about how she might be ennobled. She might find her way into the House of Lords.
No doubt about it.
That is the classic in politics. What do you get if you fail? You get a peerage. So a man called Liam, it'll come to you in a second. He was Rishi Sunak's chief of staff. Encouraged him to do the early election. He's in the House of Lords already. And it was the worst Tory election defeat in history.
It's quite incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a reward for failure.
It's a
reward for failure.
Yeah, and it's the kind of thing. It's the kind of stuff that puts people off politics in this country because people think that it just feels like such an exclusive clique.
I know what I'll do. I'll shove them in the subsidised old blokes.
They're all looking after each other and not looking after us, is how it feels.
Until they're 80,
Liam Boothsmith, who came from a council estate up in Stockton, and he was lauded as the great hope for Rishi Sunak. Disaster.
Well,
but he's in the Lord, so he's all right.
We're going to be talking to Robert Jenrick on a number of things, but he's calling for, essentially, Sue Gray to be blocked from this new role until an investigation's been done properly.
He's also quite interested on assisted dying, because he thinks the government is wrong to come forward with an assisted dying bill. Ask him on that. It's quite interesting.
I might ask him on that. Of course, we'll also be talking about the anniversary of October the 7th. He's got a piece in the Daily Mail today, which makes it all seem rather existential, this support for Hamas on our streets and the like. Still, the Metropolitan Police got all these clips of people. They're asking the public to identify all of these people at these protests on Saturday.
Well, why didn't they arrest the ones who I saw with Hamas posters and banners on Saturday? I didn't read that any of them were arrested.
It's always so slow, isn't it? But it'll be interesting to get his thoughts on that, especially. But
brilliant.
Yes.
All right, so
lots more as well.
And Ben Leo will be here from midday. Still to come, though, here. A protest is being held outside Parliament as we speak against the decision to scrap the winter fuel allowance for pensioners.
Patrick Christie's is going to be right there for us in just a minute. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Hello, time for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Some sunshine around today, but also many of us seeing a few heavy showers, and for some, expect some big thunderstorms. Low pressure is dominating and sitting down to the southwest, not really moving very far. This weather front also isn't moving very far, bringing thicker cloud and some more persistent rain over the far north of Scotland and at times through the Northern Isles. Elsewhere, we'll have some sunshine, some decent spells, in fact, across northern England and eastern England, but some heavy showers getting going now and staying fairly showery through the day across southwest Scotland. For Northern Ireland, some sunshine, quite breezy in the west and down to the far southwest. We need to watch this zone of very heavy showers that'll spread its way slowly northwards as we go into the late afternoon and into the evening. That's likely to contain some thunderstorms, some hail as possible as well. Elsewhere, the showers for the afternoon and evening rush are a bit more scattered, so many places avoiding them, but staying quite cloudy over southwest Scotland with more showers here and staying pretty dull throughout the day over northern Scotland with rain and drizzle on and off. It's further south, though, where the rain is likely to be pretty heavy. Thundery showers spreading northwards. We do have a Met Office yellow thunderstorm warning in place as these downpours spread into South Wales, across southwest England and up towards the southeast during this evening. Drifting northwards as we go through the night, but tending to ease off at least a little bit as we head through the early hours. But many places seeing further showers overnight. Temperatures holding up in double figures in most towns and cities, certainly across the south. A little lower with some clearer skies across southern Scotland and northern England. Tomorrow, it's another day of dodging the downpours, further heavy and potentially thundery showers drifting their way in. Again, quite gusty at times, particularly close to the showers on the south coast and the west coast. Thicker cloud and more persistent rain across parts of Scotland, but maybe a brighter day in the far northwest, but also turning colder here too. Bye for now.
Why go out on a Friday night when Friday night comes straight to your home?
Talking about?
Join me and my A-team of top pundits. Chemistry tonight is electric. As we tackle the big stories of the day with wit, insight and fearless energy.
Man of the people.
It's all vibe.
Just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
So, order in Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, every Friday at 8, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Jubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News. I'm Andrew Pearce with Bev Turner. Now, last week we set you a challenge to raise funds for our nuclear veterans. In the 50s and 60s, more than 22,000 British servicemen worked on nuclear tests in Australia and the South Pacific. They've suffered cancers, had children with birth defects because of the radiation. The Ministry of Defence deny this. The veterans want access to their medical records, compensation and a public inquiry into what happened to them, and the Veterans' Annual Reunion at Pontins was under threat for next year. Well, they needed
£25,000 to make the trip free for the veterans. You have raised almost £50,000.
Well done,
which is
you.
Absolutely amazing.
I think we might have even raised 50,000. Can we check the figure? If you want to donate to the Veterans' Union so they can secure a party for next year and the year after,
that's right. You'll see the QR code at the bottom right hand of your screen. Grab your phone, open the camera and scan the code. It will be there in just a minute. Seems everything's late today.
There's the QR code.
There it is.
If you're a cretin like me and don't do QR codes on principle, you can go to gofundme.com on the internet and search for Nuclear Test Veterans Union 2025. That's how I did it. It's very easy, straightforward. It took me less than 1 minute to make a donation.
I think we need, is it £17 we need to get it to 50,000 there? not got my glass. I can't see that far. I think
Who's going to send us a £17?
We need 17
We will call
quid.
out your name too. If you put £17 in quick, tell us your name and we'll read out your name on GB News.
Amazing. Right, let's see what you've been saying at home as well. Jude has said Morgan McSweeney won't be able to stop the rot at the top of this corrupt government. Starmer is totally out of his depth and politically very naive. Chopper thinks this government will get back on track. I don't think they even know where the tracks are. Now, when we spoke to Chopper earlier, and he did say, I think they'll be fine, don't forget it's a long time they're going to be in government. You and I did cast a glance askance at each other to say, I'm not sure I share Chris's optimism.
I thought it was very interesting that Matthew Talbot, who we had in earlier, he worked for Keir Starmer right up until the general election, stood down, didn't want to go into number 10, didn't sound like he'd have gone into number 10 with Morgan McSweeney because he's of the left. And he said, I've always thought it'd be a one-term government. And we shouldn't forget, it's not just the Tory party in opposition. There's Nigel Farage's Reform Party in opposition.
Quite.
And they will be making waves on lots of issues, I suspect particularly on law and order, migration. We saw 973 migrants cross the Channel on Saturday. Look, Rwanda may have been flawed. Why didn't the government let it at least try it? It may have been a deterrent.
Yeah.
Instead, they've got nothing. And by the way, 4 migrants died crossing the Channel at the weekend, including a 2-year-old who was trampled to death by his fellow migrants.
We're talking, of course, as well, it's October the 7th today, and it's easy to forget that this is a year now that this has been going on in the Middle East and Gaza and the Palestinian people being bombed relentlessly by Benjamin Netanyahu.
Shouldn't forget, however, they've still got a lot of Israeli hostages, including a British girl.
Which is exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah.
Shane has got in touch to say the family of the British hostage in Gaza have no word on her fate or how she's doing. This is what Foreign Secretary David Lammy has also said. This is Emily Damari. She's 28, and she was shot and taken from Israeli kibbutz on October the 7th. And Mr Lammy said it's a day of deep reflection and pain, thinking about the 7th of October, the worst attack on the Jewish community since the Holocaust. And we think particularly of Emily Damari, the British hostage, and her family has no word of her fate. It's amazing that we've not really been talking about her.
I wonder if the family were told to keep a low profile. Often they respond to the way the Foreign Office direct it. Think of Nazim Zaghari Ratcliffe, you know, for a long time that was low profile. So if they draw attention to her, perhaps they worry that will make it more difficult for the Aussie. We don't know, Bev, if she's alive.
Absolutely. Her poor
How do her
mother.
family get through any day?
I don't know. I don't know how you'd get up in the morning. Her mother's been doing a lot on social media over the weekend as well.
Yeah.
And talking about the fact that she does not know if her daughter is alive.
And those young people who responded to the survey saying that they think it's been exaggerated what Hamas did on October 7th, talk to Emily's mum.
Yeah.
Kidnapped from a kibbutz. Talk to the people who were at the music festival who were murdered at the festival, having been raped first repeatedly and then murdered, and some of them taken prisoner. So why do young people not see that? That's what they could have been doing.
Yeah.
And yet they're sympathising with Hamas, a horrible medieval terrorist organisation that wants to eradicate Israel off the world map.
What else have you been saying here on GBNews.com/your say? Vincent just now has said if Keir Starmer and the British government decide to send British troops to help the government of Israel and Benjamin Netanyahu in their quest to exterminate Palestinians in Gaza, they must remember that Britain has let in thousands of Hamas fighters and scattered them all over Britain, thanks to crooked lawyers telling them what lies to tell the government officials. We don't know for a fact that there are Hamas fighters, of course, who are here.
Well, bearing in mind 1 in 100 people here in this country, illegal migrants, what's the betting? A lot of them are terrorists.
Potentially, or certainly have terrorist leanings that could be triggered by any sort of political situation.
Proof positive. We've completely lost control of our borders and completely taken leave of our centres in the Home Office.
Elaine, good morning, Elaine.
Well done, Elaine.
You have just donated £17 to the nuclear veterans, taking us to £50,000. Thank you so much. You were hot off the mark there with your phone. We've done it. We've hit £50,000.
Well done, GB News viewers and listeners.
The least they deserve. Right. We're going to go.
More still to come.
Yeah, we're going to go to Downing Street in a minute. Don't go anywhere.
I'm Patrick Christie's. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference
It's fun. Oh, no, you didn't say that, Dave. I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Right, up and down the country, many parents are preparing or have indeed already sent their child off to university.
Indeed, but sometimes it can leave parents struggling to cope with the, quote, empty nest syndrome their child leaves behind. So joining us now to discuss how to cope with sending off your sprogs to university, or not so sprogs, is broadcaster and psychotherapist Lucy Beresford. Good morning, Lucy. Nice to see you this early. This is a real thing, isn't it? It's our colleague Paul Coitz, our sports expert, describes it as grief, sending your young adults off to uni and leaving the nest for the first time.
Yes, I think grief is the right word because it's an ending, and it's not just an ending with your relationship with your child. It changes from here on in, but it also is very much about your identity. Your identity as a parent is weakening. You'll always be that child's parent, but you're not going to have the same involvement on a daily basis. And so you're left to think, OK, well, what does my life look like going forward? What's my relationship? If you're in a relationship with a partner, how is that going to change? And like all elements of grief, there's going to be a bit of a process. There's going to be that transition period where you adjust to your new life, just as your sprogs, as you call them, are adjusting to their new, exciting phase of their life.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news,
Will, please bring us up to date.
or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Britain's Newsroom. So British mother Mandy Damari has made an emotional plea for the return of her daughter.
She was kidnapped a year ago today as the world remembers Hamas's horrific October the 7th attack on Israel.
My beautiful, funny and brave daughter, who I love to the moon and back, deserves to come home.
So that's Emily Damari's mother then. According to the Israeli government, 250 people were taken hostage, with 91 of them still remaining in captivity.
This comes as a frankly shocking poll shows some young Brits support Hamas because they believe reports about October the 7th were exaggerated and think, get this, the massacre of the Jews was justified.
Well, joining us now is our GBNews Home and Security Editor, Mark White. Mark, we were saying it's sort of surprising that we don't know the name of Emily Damari. Why would you say that is, as a British person who's been taken hostage?
Well, at the beginning, when this all happened, many of the families, understandably, didn't want to really be besieged by the press, so weren't really looking for that much in the way of publicity. And we did speak about the fact that there were British hostages, and not just direct British citizens, but also there are many people in this country who, you know, have relatives over in Israel. They visit on a regular basis. So there are lots of connections amongst those who were taken hostage. And as you said, close to 100 of those still unaccounted for after all this time here. But the fact is, you know, as the months pass, the news cycle gets focused on the images that come out, which are the images of the death and destruction in Gaza from Israel prosecuting the war to go after a terrorist organisation that is embedded in the community. It's part of the community. And of the 42,000 people that have been killed that we hear so much about, Israel says the thing that doesn't get reported, their estimates are that half that number, they believe, are Hamas terrorists.
What of the hostage, the British hostage? There's not much, is there, frankly, the Foreign Office can do?
There isn't. I mean, as you know, we've seen some negotiations where, as part of a deal for a pause in the fighting, certain numbers of hostages have been released. But sad to say that, you know, a significant number of those that are still being held may already be dead. And I think the families obviously know and acknowledge that themselves, because you've had so much in the way of bombing of these terror tunnels where it's believed that the vast majority of the hostages have been held, that it might either be at the hands of Hamas or indirectly by Israeli bombing. People may have lost their lives, but undoubtedly there will be hostages still alive, and the hope has to be that at some point there's some kind of negotiated solution that will allow for those that are still being held to be released.
So of the 91 that are missing, we've no clue as to how many of them are alive?
We don't, unfortunately, because they are being held, as I say, you know, probably deep underground in that maze of tunnels. And although the Israeli government and the Israeli military have destroyed many of the tunnels, there are undoubtedly still tunnels out there. Hamas had years to prepare for this. Much of the money that was going in that should have been there to redevelop the Gaza Strip was being used to fortify these positions instead.
OK, thank you, Mark. That is it from Britain's Newsroom. I'm going to be hosting for Michelle Dewberry all this week. I'll be on at 6 o'clock tonight. Andrew and I will be back tomorrow morning at 9:30. But now, Emily and Ben.
See you tomorrow.
Well, YouGov polling has found that voters think Keir Starmer's government is now sleazier than Rishi Sunak's. Why exactly is that? Could it have to do with the reconfiguration that we're seeing of Number 10 at the moment after Sue Gray was ousted from her job at the top? Also, why is there so much support for Hamas and Hezbollah in this country and on our streets? What can we do about it? Lots more to come on Good Afternoon Britain after the weather.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. It's going to be a case of sunny spells, scattered showers today. We still have some rain in Scotland before turning colder later on in the week. So we've got some heavy spells of rain persisting across northern Scotland. That will gradually move its way northwards. But across much of England and Wales and Northern Ireland, it's a case of sunny spells, scattered showers developing through the afternoon. We've already got a band across northern parts of England, but the showers could turn heavy, possibly with the odd rumble of thunder too, but highs up to 17, possibly 18 degrees in the sunshine, more unpleasant towards the north. But as we go through Monday evening, there could be some difficult driving conditions through rush hour towards the south and west, as we have some heavy spells of rain moving their way northwards. Drier for a time towards the south and east, with some early evening sunshine across Northern Ireland and parts of northwestern England as well. Still a few showers remaining across parts of Scotland, but towards the north, we've still got outbreaks of rain across Orkney and Shetland during Monday night. So through Monday evening and overnight, this band of rain across the Midlands into parts of the southeast of England will continue to push its way northwards, and again could be heavy at times. Towards the south, we then see another spell of showers moving through. There'll be some clear spells in between, but generally a mild night with temperatures holding up into the double figures. So to start Tuesday morning, some heavy spells of rain across Northern Ireland, parts of northern England into Scotland. Towards the south, some sunny spells, but also some frequent showers that could be on the heavy side, especially towards the south and west, mixed in with some sunshine too. Breezy towards the south and towards the far north. Chilly here, but in the sunshine, we could reach highs of 16 or 17. Bye-bye.
A chilly start will give way to a lovely, warm afternoon. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News.
Britain's